Serafina's Pove. Agony had a sound, a blinding, deafening crack that split the world open and swallowed everything. When the light finally receded, when the pain tapered from an all-consuming inferno to a dull, distant tremor, I resurfaced into my body like something dragged up from the depths of a frozen lake. My eyes snapped open. A ragged gasp tore from my throat as I lurched upright, only to immediately collapse back against something soft. My vision spun as I blinked furiously. Sweat slicked every inch of my skin, plastering my damp clothes and hair to my body and forehead. My limbs were heavy as stone, rattling with aftershock. My heartbeat thundered, as if it were still chasing the remnants of terror. I didn't stop blinking until the room settled into focus. Not the starlight hallway. Not the star-forged realm that had torn me apart and stitched me back together in ways I couldn't even begin to comprehend. This was wood, walls of weathered timber, a cramped space, a single lantern flickering faintly. The oddly soothing scent of sage and wood varnish lingered in the air. Elias's cabin. I knew it instantly, though everything felt slightly distorted. No, that wasn't the word. Magnified. Yes, that was it. As if I were seeing through newly polished glass. Colors blazed brighter, shadows stretched deeper. The world itself rang louder. My senses thrummed with a clarity so sharp it caught my breath. I'd never felt this awake, or this hollowed out, like my insides had been scraped clean. Yet deep in my chest, beneath the exhaustion and the fading echoes of agony, something pulsed, steady, luminous, whole. Where my body felt emptied out, my spirit felt full. Alina stirred within me, stretching languidly, as if rousing from a centuries-long slumber. Her presence radiated warmth, a dense, comforting weight pressed against my ribs. "I can feel it," she murmured. Something opened, something realigned. A tremulous breath slipped from my lips. What happened?" I whispered. A throaty laugh answered from somewhere to my right. "You happened," Elias said, tone dry as sun-bleached bone. I turned my head, too quickly. The motion sent a sharp stab of pain lancing behind my eyes. I winced, clutching my temple. When the fog of pain cleared, my gaze settled on Elias, where he sat beside a small table, sipping from a wooden cup as if we were simply sharing afternoon tea. Wait, the slight chill in the air, the song of the birds. It was morning. I'd been inside the Origin archives, or at least unconscious, for a full day and night. Elias' expression teetered between annoyance, disbelief, and reluctant amusement. "You really are Edward's daughter," he said, charging headfirst into death like a newborn calf who's never met a tiger. I shot him a feeble glare and tried to sit up. Nausea churned in my gut, forcing me back down. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" He snorted. "It's supposed to be an observation and a warning." He gestured loosely toward me. "That thing you did, the cleansing, the restoration, it kills a great many alphas, incinerates them, and you just did it." I pressed a trembling hand to my chest. Each breath sent a ripple of heat down my spine. My muscles felt alien, oversensitized, too alive, as if my body was reshaping itself to fit someone new. "What did I unlock?" I breathed. "What changed?" I needed to know. I needed to understand what that star, my star, had shown me. What part of me had been missing all this time? And most importantly, had the whatever anguish I'd gone through worked? I reached for the moment the light devoured me, for the memory that had begun to surface, but a spike of pain pierced my skull, so fierce my vision flashed white. My back arched on the bed as a raw groan ripped from my throat. "Aha!" Elias lifted a finger. "Don't try to reach beyond your limits, not unless you're a glutton for pain." I collapsed back, moaning into the pillow Elias had wedged beneath my head. He sighed as if I were a particularly bothersome student. "I don't know what you unlocked, only that you did. I felt the magical field shift the moment the hallway released you. You shed something and gained something else." His gaze sharpened. "But the side effects of spiritual cleansing are severe. You need time for your body to adjust before the effects fully set in." "But no." The word cracked through the cabin like a snapped branch. "If you push before you're stable, you'll undo everything you just suffered for. You would do well to add patience to your many strengths." Dejection tugged at me, heavy and frustrating. "But I need to know." "And you will," Elias cut in. "Eventually, take a moment to bask in your fortune. Most who attempt to cleanse their spiritual wounds end up charred husks or drooling idiots with half a brain." I wrinkled my nose. Lucky me. He smirked, sipping his tea. Ungrateful child. I harumphed, folding my arms with petulance I couldn't quite suppress. Alina brushed soothingly through my mind. He's right, I can feel it. Your power has shifted, but it's still settling. We just need time. Time, I echoed softly, as if I hadn't already spent a lifetime waiting. Ever since Alina woke up in the snowfield, since I dipped in the moonlit spring and took the first sip of moondew nectar, all that had passed was fucking time. But my frustration was weak, barely formed, because underneath it, I felt the faintest hum of something inside me that belonged to me. Something strong, something true. After a long stretch staring at the wooden beams above, strength seeped back into my limbs. My breath evened. My heart slowed from a wild gallop to something almost steady. I pushed myself upright, and this time stayed upright. Elias watched me with mild disapproval but didn't stop me. How long have I been out? Of the Origin archives? Only a few hours, he said. Most people stay unconscious for days after a spiritual scourging. You're either remarkably resilient or just too stubborn to die. I'm betting on the second. I rolled my eyes, but a reluctant smile tugged at my lips. Thank you for letting me rest here. He waved a hand carelessly. Don't thank me. Thank the archives for spitting you back out before you melted into the floor and joined the constellations in the starlight hallway. Comforting. I swung my legs off the bed and stood, testing my balance. My body obeyed, unsteady but functional. Just then, something thumped onto the floor in front of me. I startled, eyes snapping down. My bag, actually, all of my bags, my purse, my coat, the small suitcase and duffel I'd left behind at the Institute lodgings. Everything I owned from my stay here lay in a loose, unceremonious heap at my feet, as if I'd been evicted mid-recovery. On top of it all sat a single envelope, plain, thick. My name scrawled across it in neat looping script. I frowned, looking up. Elias had dropped his cup on the table, arms crossed, expression unreadable in that irritatingly calm way of his. "What's this?" I asked. "Did the starlight hallway scour your mind so hard that you don't recognize your own belongings anymore?" This time, my glare was stronger, even as unease curled low in my stomach. "I mean, why does it look like I'm being kicked out?" He snorted softly. "If Alois wanted you gone, you'd already be halfway down the mountain wondering what you did wrong." That didn't reassure me nearly as much as he seemed to think it should. "Alois?" Elias's gaze sharpened slightly. He tipped his chin at the envelope. "The director has a message for you," he said. "He has an errand to entrust you with." I blinked. "An errand? After I almost died?" Elias shrugged. "You didn't die. That's good enough for him." I scoffed, staring at the envelope again, its importance suddenly far heavier than mere paper deserved. "What kind of errand?" I asked. Elias's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. He stood, a hand rubbing his bad knee idly, and stepped aside, gesturing toward the door with a subtle tilt of his head. "Get dressed," he said. "You're done resting." I swallowed, fingers closing around the envelope at last. Whatever Alois wanted from me next, if my life's recent pattern was any clue, it would be anything but small. Kieran's povee. The barrier breathed. That was the only way I could describe it. The way the silvery lattice of magic above the ravine pulsed, slowed, then gradually exhaled into something gentler, less violent, less excruciating. The air no longer screamed against my senses. The pressure behind my eyes loosened, retreating inch by inch. The agony that had been tearing through my chest for hours softened, like a muscle finally unclenching after being held too tight for too long. It didn't completely disappear. It lingered, dull and tender, but it was no longer consuming me whole. My breath stuttered out of me. My voice broke, weak and hoarse. "She's fine." The bond no longer convulsed. It hummed, weak, distant, but alive. Alive. I pressed my palms harder against the moonstone, feeling its steady pulse beneath my skin. For the first time since I'd arrived, my hands stopped shaking. Not far away, Alois straightened where he stood at the ravine's edge. The lines etched into his face by age and years of scowling over manuscripts eased, if only a little. He exhaled as well, quiet and measured, but unmistakably relieved. Seeing that relief on his face sealed what the bond had already told me. Whatever trial Sarah had endured behind that barrier, it had ended. I pushed myself to my feet. And although I knew that Sarah was no longer in pain, every instinct I had still roared in the same direction. See her, touch her, make sure she was breathing, standing whole. I took one step toward the barrier. Kieran. Alois's voice cut through the clearing like a drawn blade. I didn't stop. Do not take another step. I spun to face him, fury crackling now that fear had loosened its hold. Don't you dare, I snarled. The trial is over. For now, Alois nodded. That does not grant you the right to charge in. My mate is not your property, he interrupted, eyes flaring pale amber. And that, he pointed towards the mountains and thick forest that hid Sarah, is not your battlefield to storm. A harsh laugh tore from my throat, ragged and raw. You think I came to fight? I just want to see her, to know she's safe. And in what capacity do you intend to do that? He asked calmly, too calmly. His consistently placid countenance was really starting to piss me off. Ex-husband, alpha, unaccepted mate, or another block placed back onto her path to freedom. The words landed like blows. I clenched my fists. That's not fair. Isn't it? Alois tilted his head. You rush in now to offer her what? Comfort or gravity? My jaw tightened. I'm still her family. I'm still Daniel's father. The name grounded me, sharpened my voice. My son is at home, terrified because he sensed something was wrong. I owe him an explanation. I owe him reassurance. Alois' expression didn't change, but something like pity flickered in his eyes. Do you truly believe, he said quietly, that Serafina would not consider her child? I hesitated. She has left her son behind, he continued, but she has not abandoned him. She has never stopped being a mother. She will be the one to reassure him. My teeth ground together. His words rang true. Of course Sarah would reach out to Daniel as soon as she could. Yet, I've already come this far. I said more to myself than to Alois. I can't just leave. He regarded me for a long moment. Then he sighed, the sound weighted with age and knowledge. Tell me something, Alpha Blackthorn, he said. What do you believe the mate bond represents? The question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth and closed it again. Commitment, I finally said after too long a pause. Fate, he echoed, just shy of a scoff. And what else? Connection, I tried. Two halves. Becoming one, Alois finished. A popular misconception, I frowned. Isn't that what it is? No, he said simply. A mate bond is a gift, a bridge, but it is not a replacement for respect, or growth, or agency. A true mate, he continued, is not a reflection meant to complete another. The one is not formed from two halves, it is formed from two wholes. A true mate is a whole being choosing again and again to walk beside another whole being. His words made my stomach hollow. I thought of every time I had framed the bond as something owed, something inevitable, a guarantee. Proof that no matter how far Sarah wandered, she would circle back to me. I had seen the bond as insurance. I had called that certainty love. Now it sounded uncomfortably like control. You tell yourself you let her go. My jaw tightened. I did. Yes, Alois agreed. You didn't force her. You didn't bind her with command or claw or bond. His gaze locked on mine and sharpened, as if he were looking back into that moment in Sarah's room through my eyes. But tell me, Alpha Blackthorn, when you said you would wait for her, what did you imagine that waiting would look like? My hands curled into fists. I was respecting her decision, giving her space. Yes, Alois nodded, and time, on the condition that nothing else moved. The truth of it struck hard. I remembered smoothing her clothes back into place, stepping away, but not truly back, promising to wait, to protect, to be ready. Even in your restraint, he went on, I'm sure she could feel the weight of you standing still, anchoring her to the version of herself she is trying to outgrow. My throat burned. What Serafina is doing now, he said, gesturing toward the barrier, is not rebellion, nor avoidance, nor abandonment. Contrary to what you believe, it has nothing to do with you. She isn't running from you. She's running toward herself, completing herself. Silence fell between us, heavy and merciless. Alois went on, a lecturer in his element. She is not searching for an alpha to give her answers or a mate to patch up the broken pieces of her soul. She is seeking the truth already beating inside her own heart. If you truly love her, he added softly, do not ask yourself how to bring her back. Ask yourself how to become a mate worthy of standing beside her, whole, powerful, unbound, on equal footing. Do not let her return, grown and established, to the same version of you she left behind. And with his lecture over, Alois stepped aside. He no longer barred my path. But I didn't move. I couldn't. His words thundered through me, colliding with memories of our argument before she left. The way she'd looked at me, exhausted, determined, already halfway gone. For the first time, I understood what I had never properly examined. Loving Sarah meant allowing her to shatter every cage placed around her, even, especially, the ones I'd unknowingly built. It meant accepting that she might never return to the version of herself who had chosen me once, a long time ago. And worse, it meant accepting that she might never choose me again at all. Alois turned away, already retreating into the trees, his part finished. I stood there a long time, staring at the barrier that no longer raged, my fists slowly unclenching. Then, finally, I turned back toward my car. Each step dragged, weighted, and slow. I slid into the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. "Do what you need to do," I murmured into the quiet. "Become who you need to be. No matter what version of you returns, I'll be here." And I would do my best to grow too. To become someone who could meet the new Sarah as an equal, not a gravity well she had to fight to escape. I thought of the years she had waited for me, night after night, believing I would come to her. It was my turn, and I would learn how to wait without certainty, without guarantees, without the comfort of inevitability. Even if the person who returned had no place left for me at all, Serafina's povey. Freshly showered and changed, I sat on the edge of the narrow bed in Elias's cabin, my bag open at my feet, the envelope resting on my knee. The seal bore the faint shimmer of layered encryption runes, subtle, elegant, and unmistakably Alois's work. I broke it. Inside, a dense stack of papers waited, but one sheet stood apart. It unfurled with a gentle whisper, ink blossoming into focus beneath my fingertips. "Serafina, I kindly request that you accompany a small escort unit transporting a batch of special medical equipment to a coastal transfer station." My brow furrowed as I kept reading. The next paragraph piqued my interest. The equipment was a newly developed medication, miraculously effective against a rapidly mutating lycanthropic infectious disease that had already taken hold in several border regions. Highly unstable, highly coveted, and if it fell into the wrong hands, catastrophic. Hence the disguise and escort. And then I reached the final section. As compensation for your time and discretion, you are granted encrypted offline access to 90% of the Institute's core research library, except, of course, the Origin archives. More details of your trip are attached. Till we meet again. I stared at the words, my mind briefly going blank. 90% of the core library. Not abstracts, not summaries. The actual data. All the research I'd hoped to comb through. Maybe more than I would have ever been trusted with under normal circumstances. A shaky, half-hysterical laugh escaped me. "That's insane," I muttered. Elias, who had been leaning against the doorframe, watching me patiently, huffed. That's I looked up sharply. "Do you have any idea what he's just asked me to do?" "Yes," he said simply. I dropped the letter into my lap. "Why? He barely knows me. How can he trust me with such a responsibility?" Elias's gaze softened a fraction. "It would seem to me," he shrugged, "that he knows enough." I glanced down at the rest of the documents. One was a map of the coastal highway route the escort team would take, marked clearly where it would overlap with the path to my next destination. Suspicion prickled faintly. "He knows I'm heading to Seabbze's pack." "He knows everything," Elias said with another shrug. "He's the most brilliant seer the lichens have produced in centuries. He probably foresaw you arriving before you were even born." I opened my mouth and then closed it, because that somehow didn't feel like exaggeration. I remembered Alois's words when he'd first seen me in his office, even though I had no appointment. So the visitor I was expecting has finally arrived. Still, questions burned on my tongue. I needed to ask why the director had helped me so much, why he seemed to know exactly what I sought, whether he understood more about the hollow in my soul than he let on. But if he wanted to answer, he would have come to me directly. Sending a message through Elias instead was as clear a dismissal as any. My time at the Institute was coming to an end. As if he possessed the same gift as Alois and could read my thoughts, Elias cleared his throat. "I suppose this is goodbye," I looked up at him. "And if I wanted to stay longer, if I wanted to ask Alois more questions," his wry smile was only slightly apologetic. "You already know the answer to that. I chewed on my bottom lip. And if I ignore the errand? If I instead scour this institute looking for him? Elias snorted. Then you'll wake up in 30 years and realize you've spent half your life going round in circles. Alois will not be found unless he intends it. When he wishes to disappear, he does so thoroughly. Even I don't know where he goes. I inhaled slowly. That's what I thought. I exhaled, looking back at the letter. I suppose this is his way of telling me I have enough to keep moving. Elias studied me for a long moment, then inclined his head. You've gained more in a few days than most gain in a lifetime. Don't cheapen that by clinging. I huffed. You sound like him. I learned from the best, he said dryly. Once my bag was zipped and slung over my shoulder, the cabin felt smaller, not in a suffocating way, in the way a place does when you've outgrown it. Before stepping outside, I paused. I need to make a phone call. Elias nodded once. I'll give you privacy. I stepped onto the porch alone, the mountain air cool against my skin, and tapped Daniel's name on my phone. He answered on the first ring. Mom. Relief crashed through me, nearly buckling my knees. I dropped onto the porch step, a smile breaking through the sting in my eyes. Hey, baby. You're okay? His voice pitched high. I couldn't reach you, and I was so worried. I'm okay, I promised. I'm safe. Sorry I was MIA. I would have called beforehand if I'd known. He exhaled hard enough that I could swear I felt his breath through the phone. Is Dad with you? He asked. I frowned. What do you mean? Why would he be with me? I had a bad dream, and he had a bad feeling. He left to come find you. He promised he'd bring you home. The words struck straight through my ribs. I had no words to explain the pressure that settled around me. Kieran had promised to stay with Daniel, and to hear that he had left our son alone should have angered me. It didn't. What it did instead was far worse. Something in my chest pulled tight. Gratitude twisted uncomfortably with dread. Had the bond screamed at him? Had he felt my pain in the starlight hallway? I closed my eyes, breathing carefully through my nose so Daniel wouldn't hear the way my voice threatened to shake. Hey, I said gently. Grandma and Grandpa were with you, right? Yes, Daniel answered. They haven't left me alone for a second since Dad left. It's annoying, honestly. I exhaled a small laugh. Good. At least that. Still, an ache unfurled low in my chest. Kieran coming for me wasn't a simple thing. It wasn't just love or worry. It was instinct, the bond tugging at him, his alpha need to protect, to anchor, to fix. The very things I was trying to step out from under. Mom, Daniel's voice was suddenly soft, pulling me out of my reverie. You have to stay safe. I don't ever want to feel that way again. Oh, baby, I sighed. I will, I promise. It might take a little longer than I planned, but no matter what, I'm coming home to you. He sniffed. Okay, just be careful, Mom. I will. I smiled, letting warmth seep into my voice. You be good for Grandma and Grandpa, all right? I always am, he said, then added, I love you. I love you too, baby, more than anything. When the call ended, I sat there for a moment longer, phone pressed to my chest, breathing through the ache. I glanced instinctively toward the tree line beyond Elias's cabin, toward the path that led back to the Institute's rear mountain, toward the barrier I knew stood there, invisible but absolute. Part of me longed to walk toward it, to let Kieran find me, to let the fierce certainty of the bond enfold me and soothe the ache that had been growing since I left. The temptation was strong, seductive, familiar, and dangerous. If I turned back now, if I let him catch me at this fragile, newly forged point, I would fold. Not out of weakness, but because, even after everything, loving Kieran had always been my most natural instinct. I remembered his voice in my bedroom, low, raw, honest in a way that had gutted me. I could make you stay, but if I did, I'd lose you forever. He'd let me go. I did not know why he was chasing me again. Maybe not to cage me, not to command me, maybe to save me. And I couldn't let him. I didn't need saving. Behind me, the wind chimes stirred. Teresa's grave rested just beyond the edge of the trees, the plain stone half lit by the slanting sun. The chimes nearby swayed, their low, clear notes weaving through the air like a blessing. I pictured my father there, head bowed, hands folded, murmuring the Lockwood ritual. I'm still walking, I murmured, still searching, just like you did. The chimes rang again, a little stronger this time, as if answering. My goodbye with Elias was as brisk and emotionless as our hello. and then I was on my way. As I reached the path down the mountain, the wind chime song trailed after me for several steps before fading into the forest. Ahead waited the escort team, the road, the coast, sea breeze, and somewhere beyond all that, the rest of myself, still unfolding, still becoming Lucien's pavie. I woke with the taste of cold ash at the back of my throat. For a disoriented second, I thought I was still in the forest, still walking that impossible loop of mist and twisted paths, still chasing a silver shimmer that never drew closer. My muscles ached with the dull, protesting burn of overuse. My head throbbed, heavy and stuffed like I'd been bludgeoned and then swaddled in wool. I cracked my eyes open. An office resolved slowly around me, vaulted ceilings etched with ancient-looking sigils, tall windows veiled in pale morning light, shelves upon shelves of bound volumes. It smelled like old parchment, mountain herbs, and ink. I was sprawled on a narrow couch set against the far wall, boots still caked in mud, my coat abandoned somewhere out of sight. I pushed myself upright, every joint complaining. Memory crashed into me in jagged, ugly shards. The barrier, the fog, the looping path. My breath turning ragged as hour after hour passed with no progress, only that gnawing certainty that I was being obstructed, and the resulting stubbornness that I wouldn't give in. I dragged a hand down my face and laughed under my breath, the sound rough. "So that's how you do it," I muttered. "You don't stop a man by blocking his path. You let him exhaust himself trying." "You were quite determined," a calm voice replied. I looked up. Sunlight cut across the edge of the desk, catching the silver in Alois's hair where he sat behind a large mahogany desk, hands folded, posture relaxed, expression mild to the point of aggravation. "How long?" I demanded, swinging my legs off the couch. "How long was I parading around in your clever little illusion?" "Long enough," he replied, not sounding the least bit remorseful. "You collapsed shortly before dawn." I stood, too fast. The room tilted. I caught the arm of the couch before my knees could betray me. My jaw tightened. "Where is she?" The silence that followed was deliberate. "Serafina has already departed on the next leg of her journey," Alois answered at last. His words struck like a blow to my jaw. Departed. Gone. A wild, searing heat shot up my spine. The room snapped into focus, every edge too sharp, every sound too bright. I straightened, fists curling at my sides. "You let her go," I said, voice low and shaking with restraint. "You stopped me and let him." Alois raised a hand. "I let neither of you reach her." My laugh was harsh, humorless. "Don't insult my intelligence. Kieran was allowed to sit beside your precious moonstone and pour himself into the bond. You barred me from the mountain entirely." "Kieran did not enter," Alois said evenly. "He did not see her or speak to her. He steadied her, nothing more." "But that was more than you let me do," I snapped, the words burning on the way out. "How is it my fault that fate chose to hand him a tether and leave me clawing at air?" Alois regarded me for a long moment, eyes thoughtful. "You believe I am siding with him?" "I believe," I said through my teeth, "that you decided which male was worth indulging." He leaned back, steepling his hands on the desk. "You are mistaken." "Oh," I took a step forward. "Because from where I'm standing, you've decided the fated mate gets to offer comfort while I'm reduced to wandering illusions until I collapse." "I am not helping Kieran," Alois said, his tone firm now, "and I am not hindering you for his sake." "Then why?" "Because neither of you was suited to see her." My eyes narrowed. "You don't get to decide that. I already did." Rage flared bright and fast. "You don't get to make that choice. Only Sarah gets to decide who is suited for her." He arched a brow. "Oh, and you don't seek to influence that decision in any way?" "This is none of your business to begin with," I hissed. He shrugged. "You're right. I'm cursed with the burden of seeing too much, knowing too much." His lips curved into a wry smile. "And I'm afraid I have a problem with keeping my opinions to myself." I scoffed. "Fine then. Say what's really on your mind. You're afraid she'll choose wrong. That's what this is. You're afraid she'll turn away from destiny if given the chance." "No," Alois said quietly. "I am afraid you will not." Something in his gaze shifted, subtle, precise, and I knew he was narrowing on a target to shoot his damn psychoanalytic arrows. "You see Kieran as the obstacle," he continued. "The bond, the title, the inevitability of what fate prefers." My chest rose and fell too quickly. "Because he is." Alois shook his head once. "No, Lucien. The obstacle has always been you. The room seemed to still. You fear, he said gently, that if you truly believe her choice could overcome fate's arrangements, and you give yourself to that belief fully, you will have no refuge if destiny proves cruel. His words slipped beneath my armor, finding every seam and slicing deep. You hedge, Alois went on. You love her, yes, but some part of you remains braced for loss. You keep an exit, a reason, a quiet, poisonous if. I opened my mouth to deny it, and nothing came out. You tell yourself you're being cautious, he said. Practical, realistic, but what you are truly doing is protecting yourself from total surrender. My hands trembled. I clenched them tighter. That is why you cannot accept waiting, because waiting requires faith, not in fate, but in her. The strength drained out of me all at once. I sank back onto the couch, elbows braced on my knees, head bowed. And I don't know what it was. Maybe it was exhaustion from my effort and futility last night, or maybe Alois' talents didn't just see into minds, but loosened lips too. Whatever it was, it wrenched the confession from me, as if ripping something vital from my chest. Yes, I rasped. I'm afraid. The silence that followed was different now, not confrontational, not sharp, expectant. I have seen destiny, I said, staring at the floor. I have watched it reach out and crush people who believed they could maneuver it. Zara's face rose unbidden in my mind, beautiful, brilliant, stubborn, burning with questions that had set her apart from the moment she knew she was different. I helped her, I whispered, too boldly, too publicly. I thought knowledge was neutral, that seeking truth could only strengthen us. My throat tightened. In our bid to find the origin archives, my voice broke and I inhaled deeply to steady myself. It was too public a search. The questions we asked drew the wrong attention. If we hadn't, she might not have been targeted, attacked. She might still be alive. The office blurred at the edges. And after, I went on, I couldn't escape the thought that I'd held her back even before that. Her bloodline was exceptional. She was destined for unimaginable greatness. I swallowed hard. Yet she chose me, alpha adjacent from some nowhere pack. And I kept wondering whether someone like Kieran, even like William, someone born into power, into legacy, would have been more fitting. I pressed my palms to my eyes, and yet, I breathed. I could never accept that choice should be stripped from me simply because of where I came from. If fate is so immovable, so infallible, then what was the point of building OTS, of carving out space for those without crowns or power arbitrarily handed down by gods? The words tumbled out, years of restraint splintering at last. I told myself that this time I would be careful. I was protecting Sarah by holding parts of myself back, parts of herself too, by guiding her quietly, secretly, by never forcing her hand. A bitter laugh broke free. I was terrified of repeating my mistake, terrified that destiny would notice and snatch her away too. I dropped my hands and stared at nothing. I thought secrecy was strength, I murmured, but all it did was widen the distance between us. And there it was, the truth, an ugly thing when laid bare. Alois said nothing for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice held something I hadn't heard from him before. Compassion. You are wounded, he said, and you have been strong for a very long time. I didn't look up. It is obvious why she would be drawn to you, he continued. But love that fears exposure cannot deepen. True lovers must touch each other's wounds if they wish to touch each other's souls. The words lodged like thorns in my chest. Fate, Alois said, is not immovable or infallible, but neither is it easily defied. The fulcrum is human resolve. I lifted my head. If choice has power, he went on, then it must be allowed to exist without pressure, without suggestion, without fear masquerading as protection. Understanding crept in, a hard pill to swallow. You stopped me, I said, because my presence would have tilted her. Yes, and you stopped Kieran from reaching her directly because the bond would have done the same. Yes. My breath left me in a long, shaky exhale. She needs to choose, Alois said, with no voice in her ear but her own. He rose from behind the desk, his movements unhurried. If you believe in the power of choice, Lucien read, then you must believe it can withstand waiting, that it can stand toe-to-toe with fate. He paused near the door. And if it cannot, he added, then you have to make peace with the fact that it was never truly yours to begin with. The door closed softly behind him. I sat alone in the hush of the office, his words sinking deep, heavy as stone in my bones. Serafina's POV. The coastal transit warehouse behind the institute was nothing glamorous. A squat concrete structure crouched between salt-scrubbed grass and a stretch of cracked asphalt that obviously hadn't seen steady traffic in years. Its windows were dark, doors mottled with rust, but the low electric hum crawling beneath my skin told me all I needed to know. Wards, old but efficient. I pulled my jacket tighter as I approached, the wind sharp and damp against my cheeks. The smell of brine and oil hung heavy in the air, carried in from the far-off docks. Inside, 4 wolves were in the final stages of prepping a matte black transport van. Unlabeled wooden crates lined the walls. I stepped inside and all 4 heads turned toward me. The woman closest to the van, lean, her blonde hair yanked into a severe knot, was the first to step forward. "You're Serafina Blackthorn," she said. Not a question. I swallowed. "I am. Iris," she said, offering a firm nod instead of a handshake. "Team lead." Her eyes, pale gray and unblinking, cut through me with sharp assessment. She stood balanced and ready, boots worn smooth at the toes from use. Beta, without question, but the kind forged by discipline and power, not proximity to an alpha. Former special forces if Alos's briefing hadn't been exaggerating. "I don't usually accept last-minute additions to my missions," Iris said. "But no one says no to Alois." I chuckled dryly. "Tell me about it." Her lips quirked slightly. "Roots tight, timing tighter. Let's get introductions done fast." She tossed her thumb behind her. "That's Gear." A broad-shouldered man with arms like hydraulic pistons glanced up from tightening a bolt on the van's undercarriage. He gave a silent nod, expression unreadable under heavy brows, then returned to work without a word. The air around him felt dense, grounded. Beta, too, his strength so tangible it seemed to vibrate in the space. "Ren," Iris continued. A petite brunette woman perched on top of a crate, one foot braced, the other dangling. She lifted 2 fingers in greeting. Her brown gaze sharpened as our eyes met, quick, assessing, like she'd already clocked 3 exit routes and my breathing rate. Omega, but there was nothing fragile about her. Not in the slightest. "Heya," she chirped. "Don't mind Gear. He's allergic to small talk." Gear grunted in reply, and Codex. Iris pointed to a dark-haired man who stood slightly apart, tablet in hand, glasses catching the overhead light as his eyes flicked between me and whatever data stream he was parsing. His aura was odd, controlled, layered, possibly a beta, possibly a low-perception alpha. Hard to tell, and I suspected that was intentional. "Pleasure," he said, giving a small wave. A flicker of déjà vu tugged at me as I recalled my first meeting with the LST team, but these wolves were nothing like those at OTS. My OTS team had been brilliant, idealistic, restless, fueled by belief and ambition. This team was something else entirely. I could feel the weight of their experience and prowess. No restless energy vibrating beneath the surface, taciturn in a way that spoke of things already endured. "So Alos's addition," Iris said, folding her arms. I didn't miss the way her gaze flicked briefly to my throat, to where my pulse carried the unmistakable hum of alpha blood. "You're alpha-born." Again, not a question. I inclined my head. "I am." "And yet," she said carefully, "no full shift." The warehouse fell very quiet. I didn't flinch. Correct. Something in the group shifted, not rejection exactly. Adjustment. Expectations recalibrating. Ren's smile faded into neutrality. Codex tapped his tablet once, likely tagging a note. Gear's eyes narrowed, not in judgment, but calculation. Iris studied me a beat longer, then nodded. Understood. No complaints. No grumbled dissent, just acceptance, anchored firmly in Alois's authority. "We roll in 10, Iris announced. Urgency pulsed in the air as the team slipped into their roles with seamless coordination. Crates were already sealed and warded, loaded onto the large vehicle. Gear secured the final crate, hefting a full 100 pounds like it weighed nothing. Ren darted around the van, testing door locks and climbing onto the roof with acrobatic ease. Codex triple-checked the internal cooling seals. The medication, unstable, disguised, and potentially catastrophic if mishandled, never left my awareness. It thrummed faintly, like a held breath. We departed as soon as everything was secure. The road curved away from the warehouse and into the coastal stretches, long, isolated ribbons of asphalt flanked by cliffs and scrub and the distant roar of waves. Gear took point in the monstrous, modified transport, engines whisper quiet despite the vehicle's size. Iris sat beside him in the passenger seat, Codex and Ren behind them. I sat in the rear at first, watching the team operate with the practiced rhythm of people who'd worked together for years. And though no one rejected my presence, the realization dawned quickly enough. I was useless, especially when night fell and the driving rotation was set. Gear first shift, Ren next, Codex after. I'll take Dawn. Iris paused. Serafina, you'll rest. I blinked. Excuse me? Alois hinted that you've been through a rough journey, she said pragmatically. You can rest. We'll wake you if needed. The words were practical, kind even. Still, they stung. Special accommodation. The story of my life. I stared out at the dark ribbon of road, jaw clenched, the engine's hum rattling up through my bones. No. I straightened in my seat. I can contribute. Iris didn't look away from the road. You are contributing by not being a liability. The words weren't cruel, just factual, but the sting lingered anyway. I didn't come to sit quietly in the back, I said, keeping my voice level, and I'm sure that's not what Alois intended when he added me. Give me something to do. Let me pull my weight. Silence stretched between us. Iris hesitated. Codex shifted, uneasy, while Ren offered a small, sympathetic wince. Finally, Iris sighed. You want a task? Yes. She glanced at me then and began to move from her perch beside her. Passenger seat, navigation, perimeter scans. You screw up, you're benched. Understood? Relief surged. Understood. I slid forward eagerly, heart pounding as I took the passenger seat next to Gear. I felt useful again. For all of 5 minutes. Within that time, it became painfully clear that I'd been given a fool's errand. Gear's navigation system was absurdly advanced, terrain mapping updating in real time, ward sensitivity scanners adjusting route efficiency. It recalibrated faster than I could blink, flipping between satellite feeds, terrain overlays, and live hazard warnings. The dashboard AI called out turns before I could even open my mouth. Even Ren's earlier scouting notes had already synced into the onboard feed, her tagged ambush points and collapsible roads integrated seamlessly. Every suggestion I made was either already accounted for or unnecessary. My fingers curled against my thigh. I tried again. There's a coastal bypass ahead. Narrow, but tagged, Ren said calmly. Ruled out. Landslide risk. I swallowed. Alternate inland cut? Gear's system already rerouted us. Heat crept up my neck. At some point, I benched myself. I slumped back, eyes fixed on the dark ceiling, feeling hollowed out. A familiar ache unfurled in my chest, the one that always whispered I was both too much and never enough. Alina stirred within me. You are doing well, she murmured. You are not less than them. Yeah, well, that's not what it feels like. Gear caught my reflection in the side mirror, and without looking away from the road, fished a cold can from the small cooler wedged at his feet and held it out to me. Here, he grunted, his voice rough, likely from disuse. You look like you need this. I blinked. I don't. Relax, he rumbled, non-alcoholic. I took it, surprised by his albeit grudging show of camaraderie. Thanks. He nodded once, then settled back, his gaze sweeping the horizon. I popped the tab and froze. The instant the seal hissed, the hairs on my neck stood on end. A shift, a ripple, an unseen current brushing across my senses like cold fingers. A fluctuation sharp enough to prickle my skin, carrying a dangerous, distorted aura that did not belong to any of us or the land. My grip tightened around the can. Something was very, very wrong. Serafina's Pove. If this had happened 2 months ago, before the moonlit spring and moon-dew nectar, before I ever set foot in the starlight hallway, I would have brushed off the feeling without a second thought. Fatigue, nerves, projection. I would have taken a steady breath, told myself I was reaching for meaning where there was none, and let the moment pass. But I was no longer that version of myself. The instant the energy rippled through me, sharp, discordant, wrong, I knew it wasn't imagination. It didn't come as a thought or a flicker of fear. It pressed in like a change in atmospheric pressure, like the moment before a storm breaks when the air tightens and every instinct screams to run. I went still, beer sweating in my grip, the tab crumpled beneath my thumb. Alina stirred, not alarmed but alert, watchful. Gear, I said quietly. Stop the vehicle. He glanced to the side, brows creasing. What? Stop, I repeated, louder now. Something's wrong. The engine's hum didn't falter. Sarah, he said, easing his hands tighter around the wheel. My diagnostics are clean. No fluctuations, no external interference. Ren leaned forward from the back seat. This stretch was tagged green. I ran it twice earlier today. I swallowed hard and forced myself to focus, letting my senses stretch outward rather than curl inward in fear. The sensation didn't fade. It intensified. It wasn't coming from the vehicle, not from the crates, not from the land beneath the road. It was ahead. I know what your equipment says, I replied, forcing my voice steady, and I know what Ren saw, but I know what I feel. Something is wrong. We don't have the luxury of vibes, Ren said, not unkindly, but firm. People are dying in the quarantine zone. Every hour counts. I'm not asking for an hour, I said. I'm asking you to slow down for a second. Gear exhaled through his nose. Sarah, we can't just stop because you have a bad feeling. Slow down, I cut in, sharper now. The words weren't a command, but they carried weight anyway. The engine dipped a fraction. I closed my eyes and centered myself, applying meditation techniques Ilsa had drilled into me in the moon hall. Not pushing outward, not pulling inward, just listening. Except this time, I could actually feel something. The energy around us felt distorted, bent like light through warped glass. There was a hollowness layered over it, a deliberate absence where something should have been. As the van rolled forward, the pressure in my chest climbed, coiling tighter and tighter. It's getting stronger, I said. Whatever it is, we're moving toward it. Gear swore under his breath and flicked on the internal comms. Iris, waking you. Moments later, Iris's voice came through from the back of the van, sharp, despite the fact that she'd been asleep moments ago. Report. Sarah's sensing something ahead, Gear said. No confirmation on instruments. There was a brief pause. Iris appeared moments later, moving up from the rear bench, jacket half-zipped, eyes already alert. Codex followed, tablet in hand, glasses slightly askew. What do you feel? Iris asked me directly. There's something wrong. I knew I sounded like a broken record, but I didn't yet have the words to articulate what I felt. She arched a brow. That's a wide net. I know, I said. I can't really explain it. I just know we're driving into some sort of danger. Iris studied me for a moment longer before turning to Ren. Scout ahead. A violent flash tore through my mind, a vision so sharp and visceral it made my stomach lurch. No. Every head snapped toward me. Ren sighed. What now? The vision clung to the edges of my mind, sour bile burning the back of my throat. Ren's body crushed beneath stone, her blood on black pavement, her hand reaching, trembling, then stilling altogether. I forced myself to meet Ren's gaze, alive, nothing like the empty, glassy stare from my vision. You go out there, I whispered, the words tasting like iron. You're not coming back, you'll die. Ren stared at me, her easy confidence flickering for the first time since I'd met her. That's not funny. I'm not joking. Iris's jaw tightened. What, you're seeing visions now? I sighed. It's like an impression. If Ren goes ahead alone, she dies. An impression, Iris echoed. So basically a glorified hunch. I know, I said, frustration burning behind my ribs. I know how it sounds. This is all new, and I don't even understand it myself. She swore under her breath. You're delaying us, and you don't even... Codex cleared his throat. Actually, Iris shot him a look. Codex. I saw something, he said quietly. Her gaze sharpened. Saw what? He adjusted his glasses, eyes flicking briefly to me. Flickers. Moonlight spectrum interference. Around Sarah. My breath caught. Codex continued, warming as he spoke. It's subtle, more like latent bleed-through. Psychic adjacent. Iris looked back at me slowly, reassessing. High-ranking wolves sometimes manifest limited psychic control, she said. Usually pack-bound, within the limits of territory. Her gaze slid over me, clinical. Outside pack sensitivity is rare, predictive perception even more so. I clenched my fists, resisting the urge to shrink beneath the scrutiny. I don't know about all that, I said tightly. And I'm not trying to undermine your authority. I'm trying to keep you guys alive. Before Iris could respond, the ground roared. A deep, grinding crack split the air ahead of us. Rockfall, Gear shouted. Boulders tore free from the cliffside, massive slabs of stone tumbling down toward the road in a thunderous cascade. Dust exploded outward, choking the air as debris slammed into asphalt. The first boulder missed us by inches. The second clipped the rear panel with a metallic scream, sending the van lurching before Gear wrestled it back under control. He slammed the brakes, yanked the wheel, and threw us into a sideways swerve so violent it sent our bodies crashing against our restraints and the weapon crates sliding in their locks. The vehicle fishtailed, skidding across gravel, metal grinding as sparks spat from beneath the chassis. "Hold, hold, hold!" Gear snarled through gritted teeth. We stopped only when the rear slammed into a ridge wall, rattling my bones. Silence followed, thick, ringing, broken only by the hiss of steaming metal and distant echoes of falling stone. Gear's hand stayed locked on the wheel. "Everyone alive?" A chorus of confirmations followed. Iris exhaled slowly. "Damage report." "Rear suspensions hit," Gear said, already scanning diagnostics. "Front axles bent, cooling systems cracked. Not catastrophic, but we're dead weight until I run a full patch job." He reached for the door handle. Every muscle in my body went rigid. "Don't." This time, there was no objection. Everyone froze. "There's something outside," I added, waiting. The pressure hadn't dissipated. If anything, it had sharpened, focused now, honed by proximity. Iris froze. "You're saying there's more?" "I'm saying the rockfall was the distraction," I replied, my pulse thundering. "The ambush is what comes next." Serafina's Pove. The silence that followed my warning was absolute. No one moved. No one reached for a weapon or a door latch or a comm. They just stared at me. Gear through the rearview mirror, Ren frozen mid-breath, Codex's fingers hovering above his tablet, Iris standing rigid between the front seats like a carved figure. Their skepticism didn't bristle with hostility or the careless dismissal I'd come to expect. Instead, it was careful, deliberate, as if they were weighing me on invisible scales. And I couldn't blame them. I couldn't explain what was happening. Not in any way that would satisfy soldiers trained to trust data and experience over hunches. Alois might have mentioned my journey, but I doubt he told them about the Origin archives and the Starlight hallway, about how the world had split open there, revealing just how fragile the boundary between realities could be. About how my senses apparently now slipped through those cracks instead of merely skimming the surface. Iris' gaze sharpened, not on the dark beyond the headlights, on me. "All right," she said, her voice calm. "Then tell me this. How many?" The question landed heavily, more a responsibility than an inquiry. I swallowed and closed my eyes. My breath deepened, pulse finding a steady rhythm. The hum beneath my skin adjusted, tuning itself like an instrument being brought into alignment. I didn't push outward. I didn't reach. I listened. The energy field around us bloomed into clarity, layered, crowded, vibrating with intent. Shapes pressed in from every direction, not as individuals at first, but as pressure points, like dents in the air where something solid should not be. Circling, waiting. My chest tightened. "At least 20, I whispered. "That's conservative." A heartbeat of silence. Then a ripple of tension through the team. "Are you sure?" The night erupted. Howls ripped through the darkness, feral and ragged, weaving together in a chorus that sent shivers racing up my arms. Shadows peeled away from the tree line, bodies emerging in motion, eyes catching the headlights with predatory gleam. A pack of rogues. They fanned out fast, sealing off every escape route with ruthless precision. Gear muttered a curse, hand darting to the ignition. Ren's posture snapped into readiness, fluid and lethal. Codex's tablet chimed, systems flickering to life as he recalibrated. Iris spoke with a quiet authority that needed no volume. "Team," she said, voice crisp, her eyes on the field. "Formation Delta. Ren, flank left. Gear right. Codex, defense and comms." Her gaze flicked to me. "You, keep sensing. I want to know their plan of attack." I nodded, heart pounding, and closed my eyes again. The ambush had layers. That was the first thing I saw once I let go of incredulousness. There were the visible rogues, moving fast, aggressive, confident, and then there were the others, the ones crouched higher along the cliff edges, the ones waiting behind the wreckage line, the ones whose presence distorted the field not with noise, but with absence. "They're staggered," I rushed out. "2 rings. First wave draws you out, second hits your blind side." Iris adjusted instantly. "Shift the line," she barked. "Don't overextend." Steel flashed. Gunfire cracked the air. The night exploded into chaos. Iris vaulted from the vehicle, her boots striking the ground with a decisive crack. "I'm coming with you," I said. Iris didn't even turn. "Negative." "What?" "You stay here." I leaned forward. "I've been trained. I can fight, and I can half shift." "I bet you can," she said, finally looking at me. But not tonight. Anger flared hot and sudden. You don't get to sideline me after asking me to map the battlefield. This isn't punishment, Iris snapped. It's risk management. I'm not helpless. No, she agreed. You're unpredictable. I blanched. You lack control, Iris continued. You're sensing things you don't understand yet. If that ability spikes mid-fight, it might immobilize you, or you'll draw attention you can't survive. There are too many variables. You don't know anything about what I can survive, I shot back. Enough, she barked, her tone leaving no room for argument. Stay with Codex, guard the cargo. She turned away before I could argue again. The order hit harder than I expected. Not because she doubted my strength, I was used to that. Because she was right. My new abilities were just that, new. I hadn't even had time to process and marvel at the fact that I somehow had psychic powers. It would be reckless to throw myself into battle without properly understanding and testing my limits. I knew all that, but still, being benched was a hard pill to swallow. Codex moved closer, lowering his voice as the team surged forward. Don't misunderstand Iris. She's not dismissing you, he said. She's keeping you alive. I don't need. You do, he cut in gently. What you're doing right now, sensing trajectories, that's not a skill you deploy without mastery. It's a beacon for danger. I clenched my jaw, hands shaking with the effort of staying still. Outside, the fight intensified. Steel clashed with claw, gunfire ricocheted, bodies crashed against rock and asphalt. Some of the rogues were in wolf form, but none of the team bothered shifting. That didn't make them any less formidable. Gear roared as he barreled through a knot of rogues, while Ren's silhouette flickered at the chaos's edge, swift as a blade. No rogue spent more than a second facing Iris before they were cut down. But as proficient as the team was, they were grossly outnumbered, and soon they started losing ground. I felt it before I saw it. The pressure shifted. The second ring closed in faster than Iris had anticipated. A feint on the right drove Ren back, leaving a gap at the rear of the transport. A rogue slipped through. Gear behind you, I shouted. Gear twisted just as claws raked across his shoulder, blood splattering dark against metal. His groan, more irritation than pain, cut through the chaos. That was it. I didn't think. I moved. I burst from the front of the van, Codex shouting my name behind me, the night air ripping against my face as I let the shift rise. Not fully. Not yet. My bones burned as they realigned halfway, muscles swelling, senses snapping into razor clarity. Claws ripped from my fingers, vision sharpening until every heartbeat around me pounded like a drum. I slammed into a rogue mid-lunge, momentum driving us to the ground. My claws found its throat before it could snarl, silencing it in a sudden, wet hush. The rogues hesitated. I felt the reason. It wasn't my strength that unsettled them, because I wasn't supposed to be there. Confusion rippled through their ranks. Their formation wavered as eyes fixed on me, recalculating to account for this unexpected variable. There's another one, someone snarled. Their gazes dropped, not to my face, to my legs, my hands, the incomplete shift. Laughter broke out, harsh and ugly. They brought a cripple, a voice mocked. The pressure eased and their guard dropped. That was their mistake. I moved into their hesitation before it could turn into caution. One came at me laughing, sloppy with confidence. I slipped under his swing and tore through his side. He dropped, screaming once before going still. Another tried to flank me. I pivoted, driving my elbow into his throat, dropping him before he hit the ground. They scrambled to adjust, barking orders and closing ranks, but the damage was already done. They dismissed me. So I fought fast and low, breaking knees, opening tendons, slicing throats. The half-shift burned, strained, but I stayed upright long enough to buy the others a little relief. Even as I tracked the others from the corner of my eye, Iris never once looked my way. She was already engaged with a wolf who was most likely their leader, slick and corrosive, her presence oozing into the field like venom, eyes burning with feral cruelty. She bared her fangs as she and Iris circled, two predators locked in a silent challenge. Well, if it isn't the Institute's favorite dog. Iris' expression didn't change. You should have stayed dead, Miasma. Then you should improve on your aim, Iris, Miasma snarled. Don't worry, Iris hissed. I'll be sure to finish the job this time. My breath hitched. Iris knew our attackers? With that piece of information revealed, their history was plain to see. Their movements mirrored each other, shaped by old training and older grudges. Every strike was laced with memory, every dodge intimate and rehearsed. "You've fallen far," Miasma taunted, glancing pointedly at me as I dispatched another rogue. "Resorting to half-shifters now? Alois must be desperate." Iris's gaze cut to me as I ripped through a rogue's back, then snapped forward again without missing a beat. Her lips curved, sharp as a blade, or fucking brilliant. Seraphina's povie. I quickly understood something as the fight dragged on. My intervention hadn't turned the tide. Not really. The balance didn't shift in our favor. It only stopped getting worse. My presence had relieved pressure, bought seconds, fractured assumptions, but the rogues hadn't come unprepared, and now that surprise had burned away, what remained was frightening competence. They adapted fast, too fast, and they proved that they, too, could throw in unforeseen variables. Something new pressed through the psychic field, thick, invasive, oily. It smothered my senses like rancid heat, slithering into my nose and down my throat before I could even name it. Pheromones. Not the subtle social kind that earned pretty women free drinks. This was chemical warfare, weaponized biology. "Cover your noses," I shouted. But I was too late. The effect crashed over me in waves, my vision blurred, the world's edges smearing and doubling. My muscles lagged a fraction behind my thoughts, as if my brain was instructing in a language my body no longer understood. Across the field, one rogue stood out. He was larger than the rest, misshapen in a way that wasn't quite a shift, muscles jutting thick in odd places, bones bunching asymmetrically beneath skin that shone slick in the headlights. Beta, but altered. Mutant. He grinned, eyes wide and unfocused, jaw distending unnaturally as he exhaled. The pheromone cloud thickened. Ren stumbled mid-stride, catching herself against a boulder. Gear swore, his movements sluggish, shoulders sagging as if gravity had doubled. Iris reacted instantly. "Masks on," she barked, snapping a filter from her belt and over her face as she repositioned, blade flashing. "Don't breathe deep. Rotate positions. Keep moving." Miasma had disappeared, or hopefully been dispatched properly this time. Iris was everywhere at once, intercepting strikes, dragging Ren clear of a flanking blow, firing a precise shot that took a rogue through the knee without breaking stride. But even her momentum faltered. Gear took the worst of it. It seemed he was finally feeling the injury in his shoulder, and his movements were heavier than before. When two rogues broke through toward the transport, he planted himself between them and the vehicle without hesitation. The impact shuddered through the ground as one slammed into him. Gear dropped to one knee with a grunt, then forced himself upright, just as claws ripped across his side, tearing deep. Blood soaked his jacket, dark and quick. "Gear!" I shouted. He waved me off, jaw clenched, and braced himself again. That was when the mutant Beta shifted tactics. He stopped targeting the fighters and turned toward Codex. Codex was crouched near the open rear door of the van, hands flying across his tablet as he stabilized the cooling wards on the crates, keeping the medication viable even as the vehicle sat crippled. His focus left him exposed, defenseless. The mutant inhaled deeply, chest expanding grotesquely, and released a concentrated burst straight at him. Codex gasped and crumpled like a marionette with its strings severed. "No!" I lurched forward despite the world tilting violently around me. Something inside me snapped into place. Not panic, not rage. Clarity, cold and absolute. The psychic noise that had been battering me fell away all at once, like a switch flipped. The pheromone haze thinned in my perception, not vanishing yet, but suddenly translucent. Heat seared behind my eyes as something vast and precise aligned within me. Alina stirred, not alarmed, not frightened. I might not have had a full grasp on what was going on within me, but she seemed to have no reservations. I didn't think, didn't try to understand what I was about to do, or even how. I released. A wave tore from my core in a silent, clean pulse. No sound, no light, only pressure. It sliced through the pheromone cloud like a blade through smoke, unraveling the chemical influence at its core, purifying it. The air cleared. Codex gulped air, coughing as color surged back into his cheeks. Ren straightened, blinking hard. Gear drew a ragged breath, shoulders squaring as if a weight had been lifted off him. The mutant Beta staggered, confusion flashing across his warped features. I didn't stop. Instinct guided me faster than reason. I reached out again, not with force, but with suggestion. A broad psychic impression swept wide and fast, brushing every rogue mind within reach. You are surrounded, not whispered, not spoken, felt. A sense of encirclement crashed into them, dozens of unseen wolves lurking beyond the tree line, high-ranking auras closing in from every side. The certainty of numbers, of dominance, of imminent overwhelm. I felt their formation buckle, fear rippling through their ranks. At the same time, without even realizing I was doing it, I focused inward on Iris. I layered her awareness with my own expanded perception, feeding her positions, trajectories, intent. Every threat lit up in her mind like a tactical overlay. Her breath hitched, but she adjusted and took the new information in stride. Now, Iris roared. She surged forward with terrifying precision, striking where the rogues were already hesitating, her blade finding throats and tendons with ruthless efficiency. Codex pushed himself upright and raised both hands. His sleeves rolled back to reveal arcane sigils flaring as he unleashed a wave of destabilizing magic that sent 4 rogues reeling, disoriented and screaming. Ren appeared at my side without a word. She didn't ask, didn't hesitate. She flowed into the gaps my perception revealed, moving where I looked, striking at every weakness I sensed. Together, we dismantled their flanks, my mind freezing targets in place for split seconds while her blades finished the work. The mutant beta roared, shrugged off the psychic residue, and charged straight at me. Anyone's first instinct would have been fear, to retreat, defend. I locked onto him. The energy field tightened like a vice around his mind, freezing him mid-stride. His snarl died, body seizing, eyes bulging in shock as he struggled and failed to move. Iris was there in a breath. Her alloy dagger kissed his throat, drawing a thin, deliberate line of tar-dark blood. "Yield," she said with deadly softness. He growled. All around us, the rogues broke ranks. The illusion of encirclement shattered into real terror as they scattered, dragging their wounded with them. Howls faded, footsteps thudding away into the scrub and ravines beyond. Silence reclaimed the road. For a long moment, no one moved. My legs trembled as the psychic intensity drained away, leaving bone-deep exhaustion. I forced myself to stay upright, breathing fast but clear. Iris stepped back from the immobilized beta, then glanced at me. Her gaze locked with mine, assessing and recalibrating. Then she nodded once. "I retract my previous words," she said, voice steady, solemn. "Welcome to the team, sister." Something warm and unexpected bloomed in my chest. Pride, belonging. Beneath the cold sprawl of stars, we worked quickly. Gear grunted through repairs, teeth clenched but uncomplaining as Codex patched him up before working on rerouting the systems. Ren moved among us, efficient and light, handing tools without being asked. When we finally rolled back onto the road, engines humming, the night felt different. I watched the coastline slip past the windows, the steady rhythm of tires on asphalt no longer soothing the way it once had. I'd grown up in a world that was brutal but simple. Claws and ranks, pack law and territory lines. Violence you could see coming, enemies you could understand. Tonight, I'd fought a mutant beta who breathed poison into the air, fought alongside another beta, or low-perception alpha, who unleashed magic from inked skin. Faced traps woven from silence and shadow. Unleashed something within myself that answered not to muscle or instinct, but to thought. I curled my fingers, remembering the cold clarity of it, the way the world had bent to my will. I was no longer just far from home. I was far from the version of the world I'd once understood. Somewhere between the distant crash of waves and the fading howls, the realization settled, heavy and irreversible. Toto, I've a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore. And whatever waited ahead, the coast, sea breeze, the truth of what I was becoming, I would face it in a world that no longer played by the rules I'd been raised on. Serafina's Pov. The rest of the journey unfolded with a peaceful efficiency that felt almost unreal after the chaos of the ambush. Gear drove with steady focus, even as Codex monitored his vitals and the vehicle's patched systems simultaneously. Ren scouted ahead and behind in practiced sweeps, slipping in and out of the dark like she was a part of it. Iris coordinated with clipped murmurs over comms, trusting my input without question when I flagged minor fluctuations in the psychic field along the route. For the first time since leaving the Institute, I wasn't bracing for friction. I was part of the machine, and eventually, When the adrenaline and narrow-mindedness of the battle faded, all I was left with was silence. It was not the tense hush of an ambush, nor the fragile calm before violence, but the silence that follows survival, the kind that leaves too much room for thought. Far too much room. My hands began to tremble. I stared down at them, flexing my fingers as if they might belong to someone else. They looked the same, felt the same, and yet I knew that something fundamental had shifted. I had felt minds, touched them, freaking influenced them. The realization settled like a weight on my chest. I wasn't imagining things. I hadn't panicked and stumbled into coincidence. I had sensed danger before it existed in the physical world. I had altered the battlefield with thought alone. I had reached into Iris's awareness, inside another person's perception, and changed what she could see. A psychic. The word echoed through me uncomfortably. I leaned back against my seat, closed my eyes, and let the truth land. Where had this come from? I thought about my training, all my sessions in the Moon Hall, all the secrets my parents had kept about my life. And then, a force may have sealed away what you were born with, a memory, a truth, a power. The Starlight Hallway can attempt to repair a portion of what was lost. Was this it? Not a gift from the Starlight Hallway, but the unearthing of something that had always been hidden deep inside me? The hallway had stripped me open, rearranged me, and sent me back out into the world altered. "You're still yourself," Alina said softly. "If anything, you're more yourself now than you've ever been." A reluctant smile tugged at my lips. I breathed out, words failing to capture the feeling. The memory of the psychic surge flickered behind my eyes. How natural it had felt once it began. How right it had seemed. But then, "I reached into people," I replied. "I changed things without asking. That feels like too much power to be given. How the hell am I going to learn to control that?" Alina didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was quiet. "The hallway did not give you power. It removed the walls that kept you from accessing what was already there." That offered no comfort. "Maybe walls exist for a reason," I said. "Yes," she agreed. "And now you must learn how to build new ones, but with a gate this time. And you will learn when and how to open that gate." I swallowed. "What if there's more?" I asked. "What if I don't know where it ends?" "Then you will learn," Alina replied simply, "as you always have, and you will conquer, as you always have." By the time the coastal transfer station came into view, a fortified complex half hidden against the cliffs, the sky was beginning to fade to another dusk. The salt-laden air grew heavier, blending with the faint antiseptic tang, escaping the sealed crates. The local coordinator greeted us at the gate, flanked by sentries whose fatigue seeped through their rigid stances. Relief washed over his face as Iris confirmed the shipment's integrity. "You have no idea how close this was," he said, voice rough. "The infection curve spiked overnight, another day, and—" He stopped himself, swallowing hard. "Thank you." I watched as the crates were transferred, signatures exchanged, and wards verified. As the medication left our custody, the tight coil of responsibility we'd carried since Elias's cabin finally unwound. The job was done. Whatever test this journey had been, and I was certain it was a test, I could only hope I'd passed. When it came time to part ways, the moment weighed heavier than I'd anticipated. Wren clapped my shoulder lightly and smiled, her warmest one yet. "Try not to scare the next team as badly, yeah?" I huffed a tired smile. No promises. Codex adjusted his glasses, then hesitated before extending his hand. "If you ever want help understanding what you're doing, what you can do, reach out. I'd be interested." "Careful," I teased. "I might take you up on that." The corner of his mouth twitched. Gear said nothing, as usual. He simply inclined his head once, solid and sincere. Iris held my gaze last. "You train that gift of yours," she said. "Turn it into a veritable weapon that sends your enemies scattering." I exhaled. "I will." Her lips quirked as she assessed me, as if comparing her first impression of me with now. "Yeah," she nodded. "You will." She reached out and shook my hand. "Until chance allows." The team left, vehicles peeling off toward their next assignments. I watched them go until the road swallowed their taillights. Then I turned off the coastal road. Seabbze's pack lay just beyond a stretch of ancient pines and tangled brush where forests surrendered to cliffs and the open sea. My destination was close. I stepped beneath the canopy, and stopped. The quiet hit me like a physical barrier. No insects, no birds, no rustle of small creatures fleeing my presence. Nothing. Goosebumps crawled across my skin. I took one more step, then froze as movement stirred ahead. Mist curled low between the trees, parting as over a dozen figures emerged. My sigh was more frustration than an exhalation of fear. Could I not catch a fucking break? 3 figures broke away from the cluster. 2, I recognized immediately from the ambush. Bloodied, wounded, but very much alive. The third, unscathed, moved between them with a disturbing calm. His presence so wrong it sent a pulse of pain through my temples. I reached out, but my perception slid off him as if he were coated in oil. "Easy," one of the rogues called out, voice hoarse. "We're not here to hurt you." I laughed under my breath, positioning myself instinctively. "That's comforting. You should put it on a banner." The different male tilted his head, studying me. "Interesting. My sense of humor? Thank you. I don't get enough credit for it." He smirked. "I can feel you struggling, trying to reach into us as you did before." I clenched my jaw and pushed harder, but it was as if a stone wall separated my mind from theirs. "Since you're new to all this, you probably don't know the concept of silencers." I tensed. The name provided enough context for me to understand that his presence was why my new abilities were faltering. So I tried to reach outward, to anything or anyone who could have been shadowing my path. Maybe the team was still in the vicinity. Didn't Kieran say I would be under constant surveillance? There was nothing. I bit back a curse. So much for cosmic luck. It was almost laughable. I'd spent 30 years ignorant of any abilities, and after having them for a couple of hours, I felt crippled without them. One of the rogues limped forward, palms raised. "This doesn't have to be another fight," he rasped through the bruised lung Gear had given him. "We don't want to hurt you. Our leader is merely intrigued by you and your abilities. Come with us, and this ends peacefully. We'll let you live." I might not have been able to push forward with my abilities, but the lie hung like a cloud of rot and decay between us. "Maybe you don't realize I was born 30 years ago, not this morning," I said. "I know going with you is a death sentence." Their expressions hardened. The silencer moved first. The psychic field collapsed inward. My awareness suddenly muted, strangled. Heat lanced behind my eyes as I staggered back, barely avoiding a swipe of claws. I fought on instinct, reverting to my training. I gave ground deliberately, striking only to create space, retreating step by step as they pressed me toward the sound of the sea. The trees fell away. Wind howled. Cliffs towered ahead. Waves crashed far below, violent and relentless. My back hit a large, protruding boulder. I forced a steady breath, letting calm and authority seep into my voice. No psychic tricks, nothing powerful, just enough. "Last warning," I said, the wind carrying my words with an eerie undertone. "Back. Off." They laughed. "You're cornered," the silencer sneered, "or I have you right where I want you." He faltered for a heartbeat, his gaze darting around us, and then called my bluff. "You were right. You don't get enough credit for your sense of humor." "Don't." A horn sounded then. Clear, resonant, cutting through the roar of the sea. We all turned toward the sound, and I wondered if I should add fortune teller to my ever-expanding resume. Figures strode across the waves as if the water itself bore them up. At their head, a woman moved in fluid transitions, wolf to wolf again, fur gleaming in the moonlight, hair streaming behind her like a banner. She scaled the jagged rocks with a grace that left both the rogues and me dumbstruck until she landed lightly on her feet between us. Her smile was as lethal as it was beautiful. "You have some nerve," she said, voice carrying the weight of command, threatening an honored guest in Seabbze's domain. Seraphina's pove. Surprise flickered for only a heartbeat before the rogues lunged. Seabbze responded in the same instant, swift as a pulse. The woman who sprang between the rogues and me moved with the untamed grace of the sea itself, fluid, unstoppable, and utterly merciless. She soared through the air, then struck, her shape flickering between human and wolf with effortless mastery. Silver gleamed. A rogue crashed down, sand bursting beneath him. That was the moment everything changed. One breath, I was pinned against stone and wind. The next, the tide crashed back so fiercely it felt as if the world itself had tipped. "Fall back," someone shouted. Too late. Seabbze reinforcements erupted from shore and trees, crashing into the rogues like a living wave. Silver, slate, stormy blue-gray forms colliding with snarling precision. Claws slashed, bodies slammed, sand fountained. The air grew heavy with the sharp tang of blood and salt. A rogue darted for the trees, but was snatched mid-leap and slammed face first into the earth. The silencer moved differently. While the others panicked, he calculated, eyes narrowing as he took in the sudden disadvantage. Then he moved backward, angling for the trees, trying to slip between the chaos like a shadow peeling away from the light. "No," I said, stepping forward. The woman turned her head enough to catch my voice. "Him," I said, locking onto the silencer. "Capture him, please. I need him alive." Her gaze flicked to where I was staring and sharpened instantly. She didn't hesitate or question me. On him. Her voice was barely sound, but it was enough. Two Seabbze wolves intercepted the silencer mid-turn, cutting off his escape with brutal efficiency. He snarled, power crackling outward, but an invisible field snapped tight around him, crushing his ability before it could fully manifest. His snarl broke into a strangled gasp. For the first time since I'd sensed him, I felt it. Space. Relief. The fight ended quickly after that. Rogues were disarmed, bound, and restrained with faintly glowing cuffs etched in unfamiliar runes. The wounded were hauled upright, bleeding and cursing, their bravado gone. I stood rooted, heart thundering, wind whipping my hair across my face. The woman who shielded me strode over, wiping blood from her knuckles with a wry grimace. I properly took her in then. She had hair the color of sunlit sand, braided away from a face defined by eyes so blue they were almost blinding. She looked to be about her mid-20s. "Well," she said lightly, "that was fun." I huffed. "You and I have a very different definition of fun." She grinned. "You should see our holidays." She studied me more closely now, eyes flicking over my stance, my breathing, the tension still humming under my skin. "You handled yourself well." Also different definitions of well. Her gaze softened. "Well, you're safe now." A horn sounded again, this one signaling regroup rather than alarm. She straightened, her voice carrying cleanly across the shoreline. "Let's escort our guest home." She smiled at me. "My sister would be glad to know you're safe." I blinked. "Sister?" She stretched a hand. "I'm Maris, Celine's younger sister." I shook her hand, a little awed. "It's lovely to meet you. It's definitely exciting to meet you." She tipped her head toward the rest of the entourage. "Shall we?" I followed them inland as the cliffs gave way to winding paths. Seabbze wasn't hidden the way forest packs were. It didn't fold inward, it opened. Homes dotted the rise above the shore, stone and wood and glass, balconies facing the ocean, doors thrown open to let salt air and laughter spill freely into the night. Lanterns shimmered in gold and silver. Wolves and humans moved freely among one another, some barefoot, some half-shifted, some laughing with drinks in hand. Music drifted from somewhere uphill, strings and drums woven together in a rhythm that pulsed with life, not ceremony. I slowed without meaning to, my jaw dropping. Maris noticed. "It's different here, huh?" "Yes," I admitted. "It feels like no one's holding their breath." She huffed an amused breath. "Why would they when the air here feels so amazing?" By the time we reached the central estate, more a sprawling coastal hall than a fortress, the ease in the air had settled in my chest. Waiting at the entrance stood a woman whose presence stilled the air without dimming it, her sea-green hair blowing gently in the slight breeze. Luna Celine. She stepped forward, practically gliding across the sand as she offered me one of her beautiful, warm smiles. "Serafina," she said brightly. "Welcome to Seabbze." I mirrored her smile. "Thank you for receiving me, Celine." "Of course." Her eyes flicked briefly to her sister beside me, then back. "I hear you had an eventful journey. Fortunate that Maris found you first." Maris grinned. "Patrol has been boring the last couple of days. The excitement was very welcome." Celine's laughter was soft but genuine. "Come, the welcome party is only just beginning." I had a hard time believing the feast before us was all for me. It was laid out beneath open arches, tables heavy with food that steamed in the salt air, fresh fish glazed with citrus and herbs, warm bread, jewel-bright fruit. Candlelight flickered against stone, and voices rose and fell in easy harmony. A tall male rose from the head of the center table, presence steady as bedrock. "Serafina," Celine said, her eyes glowing as she took him in, I'd like you to meet my mate, the alpha of Seabbze's pack, Adrian. Serafina, he greeted, voice warm. A pleasure. Anyone my Celine holds in high esteem is more than welcome here. Thank you, I replied. Aye. Before anything else could be said, small feet pounded across stone. I see her! I see her! Something small collided with me at knee height. My gaze snapped down as tiny arms wrapped around my legs with startling force, and a little voice announced, You smell like moonlight. Celine laughed and said fondly, That would be Dora, your #1 fan. Dora couldn't have been more than 5, dark curls wild, eyes, one sea blue, one gold, bright and unwavering. Behind her, 3 older children hovered, watching with varying degrees of interest and shyness. Celine turned to them, her pride and affection unmistakable. This is Kai, she said, nodding to the eldest, who stood furthest away. He returned my smile with a soft one of his. Neri. Neri met my gaze head-on, her fingers twisting in her sleeve. One eye was blue like her sister's, and the other was the most gorgeous lilac ever. And Reef, Celine finished. Reef took one step forward before stopping himself, hands clenched at his sides. Unlike his siblings, his heterochromia manifested as a balanced, entrancing swirl of green, gold, and blue. I watched the LST closely, Neri said, smiling shyly, her mismatched eyes twinkling. You were inspirational. I recalled what Celine had told me after the LST. My daughter calls you her Luna of inspiration. I smiled at Neri, absent-mindedly stroking Dora's hair and letting the little girl cling however she pleased. I'm truly honored, I said to all of them. Dora giggled and pressed her cheek to my leg like it was a settled fact. Dinner blossomed with warmth and laughter, stories flying, Celine spinning wild tales of my LST exploits, while her children, who had apparently memorized the whole event, loudly set the record straight. Dora stayed firmly attached to me. Neri kept sliding nervous glances my way like she were seated across from a celebrity. The boys loosened up eventually, their boisterous laughter joining the music in the air. Adrian watched the chaos with quiet amusement, his hand resting gently at Celine's back. For a while, I forgot the road, the ambush, the ache beneath my skin. But then, after the plates cleared and the lanterns dimmed, the pull of purpose returned. After Maris wrestled Dora from me, Celine offered to lead me to my room. I stopped her. Actually, I'd like to see the prisoner, I said quietly. Celine studied me for a long moment, then she nodded. Come. The holding cell was nothing like I expected. Not a dungeon, not chains and stone. Clean, circular, precise. Runes etched into the walls hummed softly. Not crude suppression, but careful limitation. I understood immediately what it meant. You're familiar with psychics. Look, I murmured. Celine slid me a conspiratorial smile. You'll find, Sarah, that Seabbze is unlike any other pack you'll ever encounter. I couldn't help but return her smile. Something did feel different here. Unique. That's exactly what I was looking for. Celine stopped just inside the door. This cell restricts outward projection, she said, but he still has some level of power within. Are you okay with that? I took in a deep breath, remembering the sudden emptiness from earlier. I'll manage. With that, I stepped in. The silencer sat at the center, hands folded, eyes bright with something like amusement. So, he said, the moon-touched girl returns. I ignored the chill that ran down my spine and stepped closer. Who sent you? I asked. He smiled, and something brushed my thoughts. Like fingers stroking my mind, subtle, testing. I pushed back instinctively and felt his surprise flare. Oh, he murmured, you really are interesting. The pressure shifted. Suddenly my thoughts felt slippery, like trying to hold on to oil-slicked marble. You're doing it wrong, you know, he continued, his voice gentle. You keep reaching outward, you should be listening inward. Unbidden, a memory tried to surface. Warm light, a voice saying my name. My breath hitched, and I stumbled a step back. Stop, whatever you're doing, stop it. I hated that my voice trembled. The silencer's smile turned sardonic. But why? Inside your head looks so fun. Before I could reply, a voice cut clean through the chamber. Looks like I missed dinner. The silencer stiffened. Celine turned. A man stepped inside, sea spray clinging to his coat, sandy brown hair slightly damp. Kieran, Celine said, equal parts relief and annoyance. You're late. He grinned. I apologize, sister. You know how time gets away from me when I'm training. Then his gaze settled on me. One eye was as startlingly blue as Maris's. The other was a calm sea green. "And you must be Serafina," he said. His eyes flicked to the silencer and his smirk sharpened. "Seems like I missed quite the welcome." "Serafina's Pove." The silencer laughed. The sound was wrong somehow, too light for the room, too careless for a man bound inside layered psychic restraints. "Well," he said when he was done, tilting his head as he looked at Kieran, "this is spectacularly bad luck." Kieran didn't respond right away. He took another step further into the chamber, and the door sealed behind him with a muted hum that reverberated through the curved walls. His gaze lingered on the silencer, his smile unfurling slow and razor-sharp. "You should be thanking whatever gods you pray to," he said, "that I arrived after you were secured. My twin sister is a lot more merciful than I am." The silencer's smile twitched. "Still sore about last time?" "I spared your wretched life," Kieran replied pleasantly, but an edge crept into his voice. "And here you are pushing your luck with an arguably more formidable foe." The silencer stiffened ever so slightly, and his gaze flicked to me again, measuring, reassessing. "You really think she's a threat?" he asked Kieran, skepticism edging the mocking in his voice. "A half-shifter with a fractured wolf? She's a novelty. At best, she experienced beginner's luck." The words snagged inside me, tugging at old wounds. Before I could respond, Kieran laughed. "Oh," he said, shaking his head, "you poor idiot." The silencer frowned. "Excuse me?" "You thought you could hold her," Kieran continued, stepping closer now. "Nudge her thoughts, slip your fingers into the cracks. You thought you were hunting prey." Kieran glanced at me then, mismatched eyes glinting. "You were courting your own destruction." The silencer's gaze snapped back to me, disbelief flickering across his features. I mirrored the disbelief. Was there another she in this room other than Celine and me? "That's not possible," he hissed. "Her field is unstable, raw and unanchored." "You felt what she let leak," Kieran replied with a nonchalant shrug. "You fell for the trap she set for you." I swallowed. I hadn't meant to let anything leak. The silencer leaned forward despite himself, eyes widening. "No," he said slowly. "A half-shifter shouldn't exceed novice levels. There are limits." Kieran's smile would have been described as pitying if it weren't as sharp as a knife's edge. "Yes," he agreed, "there are." He looked at me again, "And she hasn't even found them yet." The air itself seemed to shift, charged with a new electric tension. It was not pressure, but a sudden alignment, as if unseen currents clicked into place all around us. Celine, who had been watching quietly from the doorway, exhaled softly. "I think," she said, "that Serafina is in capable hands." Her gaze met mine. "We'll speak later." I nodded, still trying to process the way the room felt. Too full, too layered, like I was standing blindfolded at the edge of something vast. Celine stepped away, the door sealing behind her with a soft hum. The silencer watched her go, then scoffed. "Don't tell me your Luna believes that bullsh." Kieran moved. He crossed the remaining distance in a blink, fingers snapping up to seize the silencer's chin. The man gasped, words cutting off as Kieran forced his head back, eyes locking onto his. "Quiet," Kieran said mildly. The air folded inward. I felt the psychic field constricting, not around me, but around the silencer, layers collapsing one by one like doors slamming shut. The man's pupils dilated. His breath stuttered. Kieran's voice dropped, resonant, carrying something deeper beneath it. "Show me." The silencer shuddered. Images flickered, not in my mind, but in the space between them, impressions bleeding outward despite the containment. I tasted salt and rot, heard distant voices layered over one another, felt gnawing hunger press in. Kieran sighed after a beat. "That's disappointing." He released the silencer as abruptly as he'd grasped him. The man sagged forward, coughing, sweat slicking his skin. "No grand conspiracy," Kieran said, glancing at me, shrugging apologetically. "No shadow council pulling strings. Just opportunists who saw a shiny new toy and wanted to see what makes it glow." My stomach twisted. "They targeted me for curiosity?" "For potential," Kieran corrected. A sputtered laugh shook the silencer's body. "You should be flattered." Kieran rolled his eyes. "Ignore him." That, as hard as it was, I could do. What I couldn't ignore was the ease with which Kieran had just done what he'd done. It had taken less than a minute to withdraw the information he'd needed from the silencer. No strain, no hesitation, no visible effort. "That was fast," I said. Kieran tucked his hands into his coat pockets. "Yes, you didn't even—" I stopped, searching for words. "You didn't even try. It felt like you were already there, in his mind. He smiled. This one was real, proud. That's because I barely did. Going through minds like his is like taking a walk in a park. The silencer snarled. Don't insult me. I'm a fucking weaver. Kieran inclined his head towards him. And I'm advanced intermediate. I'll be a dominator before you know it. The words meant nothing to me, and everything. The silencer spat. Fuck you. Kieran rolled his eyes like the silencer was a child throwing a tantrum. Then he gestured toward the door, his tone light again. Come on, let's get you some air before your head explodes. I didn't spare the silencer a glance as we left. With every step, the chamber's heaviness faded, replaced by the open hush of Seabbze's corridors and the steady, grounding thread of distant waves. Okay, I said finally. I'm new to all this and that back there. I pointed towards the chamber. Made me feel like a toddler in a university lecture. You need to explain, slowly, eloquently, preferably starting with everything. Kieran laughed. Fair. We stepped out onto a terrace overlooking the sea. Moonlight rippled across the water, silver and endless. Psychic ability, Kieran began, leaning against the railing, isn't magic. It's not telekinesis or spells or whatever nonsense mundanes like to imagine. He tapped his temple lightly. It's perception, connection, the ability to sense and guide the fundamental network of spiritual resonance within the ethereal sea. I blinked. The what? The ethereal sea, he said. Spirit sea, if you prefer. Everything alive leaves ripples in it, supernatural and natural, animals, plants, even places. The stronger the being, he continued, the clearer the ripple. The higher the psychic rank, the broader and deeper the range of ripples one can perceive or influence. My head was spinning. There are ranks, like a fucking video game. Kieran smiled, holding up a hand, roughly 5, each harder than the last, exponentially so. He counted them off casually. The aware, influencers, weavers, dominators, and then, he paused, eyes flicking briefly to the moon. Sovereigns. I swallowed. That last one sounded mythical. It is, he agreed. Most never even meet a dominator. Sovereigns are rare. And, back there, the silencer called himself a weaver? He nodded. Intermediate level. They can create complex psychic realms, influence more than one emotion at once, hold clear telepathic conversations, and even implant short-term commands. I gripped the edge of the terrace. That sounded a little too similar to what I'd done. And you? I'm advanced intermediate, Kieran said. Technically a weaver, but close enough to dominator that people get nervous. A weak laugh bubbled out of me. I'm definitely nervous. He chuckled. I'll take that as a compliment. I hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning a hole through me. What about me? Kieran studied me in silence for a long moment. Finally, he shook his head. It's frustrating. My heart sank. Bad frustrating? No, he said quickly. Complicated frustrating. He straightened. Your abilities are newly awakened. As he said, they're unstable. On the surface, you read like a novice. Or at least you should. I exhaled. But, he continued, eyes sharpening as if he'd switched on X-ray vision, there's too much depth beneath that, too much potential. I held my breath. Once you learn to control them, Kieran said slowly, you won't stop at intermediate. At minimum, you'll reach advanced level. The world tilted. At minimum? I echoed, my voice barely more than a whisper. He met my gaze. Celine sensed your potential the moment she met you, you know. That's why she kept inviting you here. What exactly is here? I asked. Back home, there's barely any mention of psychics or other powers, but it's like the norm here. Kieran shrugged. The more special you are, the better it is to withdraw from the world, not draw too much attention for fear of attracting the wrong one. I turned to the sea, waves surging below, restless, alive, echoing the churn of Kieran's words inside me. My sense of self was splintering, and I knew that when I pieced it back together, the image would be forever changed. Welcome to the deep end, Kieran murmured, his words carried on the soft breeze. I stared out at the sea, moonlight trembling across its surface, and wondered how far down it went. Serafina's povie. I couldn't sleep. I lay on the wide bed in the room Celine had readied for me, sheer curtains fluttering with the sea breeze, moonlight painting silver ribbons on the floor while my thoughts tumbled restlessly. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt it again. Depth. Not the sharp, overwhelming surge from the ambush. Not the crushing compression of Kieran's interrogation. This was quieter. Broader. like standing ankle deep at the edge of the ocean and suddenly realizing the water stretched on forever. The ethereal sea. You're trembling, Alina noted. I snorted softly into the pillow. Can you blame me? She didn't answer right away. I felt her presence instead, warm, watchful, coiled close to my core the way she'd been since I woke up after the starlight hallway. You're excited, she said finally, and relieved, and terrified? A little, she admitted. But what I was going to say is, awake. I rolled onto my back, staring up at the ceiling beams. What do you think about what Kieran said, about my rank? I exhaled. Advanced intermediate at minimum. Alina hummed. The sound rippled through me, a resonance aligning with my own. He was being conservative. I sucked in a sharp breath. What does that mean? It means, she said carefully, that what you showed was instinctive, untrained, unanchored, and still you bent fields, projected mass suggestion, and brushed layered minds without collapse. My pulse quickened. That should still fit advanced intermediate. No, Alina replied. It exceeds it. I sat up, shoving the blankets aside. The room smelled of citrus and salt, and the scents grounded me enough to think. But even Kieran couldn't see clearly. Kieran sees structure, Alina said. Ranks, precedent. He doesn't see what hasn't finished forming. I swallowed. So what are you saying? I'm saying, Alina said gently, that you are not done waking up. The magnitude of her words sent a thrill skating down my spine. I'm satisfied, I said honestly. Advanced intermediate is more than enough. Amusement rippled through me. Too many people did it for too long, and now you too underestimate yourself. Apparently, I murmured aloud. I swung my legs off the bed and padded across the room, the stone floor cool beneath my bare feet. I retrieved my laptop and the nondescript thumb drive that had been inside Alois's envelope. I turned the tiny device over in my fingers, marveling that it contained nearly the entire heart of the Institute's core research library. Sometimes the most unassuming vessels hold the most power, Alina murmured. I chuckled as I inserted the drive into my laptop. You've gotten so philosophical lately. I could have sworn she shrugged within me. The interface bloomed into view, clean, minimalist, deceptively simple. Categories unfolded as I scrolled, becoming more detailed as I clicked on topics and subtopics. Psychic theory, combat applications, field ethics, suppression protocols, anchoring case studies. The next few hours slipped away unnoticed. I devoured the materials with a hunger that surprised me. Diagrams of layered resonance fields, annotated examples of battlefield manipulation that suddenly made my instincts during the ambush make sense. Defensive psychic lattices that could redirect hostile influence without brute force. Group cohesion techniques that explained how I'd boosted Iris's awareness without meaning to. Then it got a little disturbing. I read about psychic overreach, cases where unanchored psychics collapsed under feedback loops, their minds splintering when they tried to project too broadly without an anchoring force. My fingers stilled. Anchoring force. Kieran had touched briefly on that while he explained to me, but he hadn't delved deep. He mentioned that his anchoring force was the ocean, but I didn't need to worry about finding mine just yet because he was part of the rare few who knew upon awakening. Most don't manifest one until dominator level. I pulled up the case studies. A dominator anchored to volcanic pressure, another to starfall radiation. One rare example, fragmentary, heavily redacted, anchored to lunar resonance. My breath caught. You smell like moonlight. The moon-touched girl returns. What had Codex said he saw around me? Moonlight spectrum interference? That doesn't mean, I hesitated. It doesn't mean anything yet, Alina agreed. Anchors choose their timing. Yours could be anything. I leaned back in the chair, staring out at the dark sea beyond the window. The waves reflected the moon in broken, shifting paths, never still, never the same. Before I could sink deeper into speculation, my phone chimed. Incoming call. Daniel. Shit, I breathed, glancing at the time. I can't believe I forgot. I accepted the call instantly. Mom, Daniel's face filled the screen, hair damp as if he just showered. You promised to call once you get to Seabbze. I know, baby, I said, giving him an apologetic smile. I got sidetracked. So, how did the trip go? I thought of the rogue attacks and my near abduction. Mom, Daniel leaned closer to the screen, eyes narrowed. Are you okay? I am, I assured him, smiling despite myself. The trip went smoothly, better than expected, actually. He relaxed visibly. Yeah, you're glowing. My smile widened. I am? He nodded, his face brightening. Something good happened, right? I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. Yeah, I'm learning a lot about myself. Growing a lot, too. His grin widened. Like power-wise? Like me-wise, I corrected gently. But yes, power too. He pumped his fist. That's awesome, Mom. I laughed softly. Thank you, baby. Anything new going on with you? His expression shifted then. Oh, Grandma Margaret sent my Christmas present early. I blinked. She did? Yeah, he said. And she asked when you're coming home. She said she might be traveling soon and hoped to see you before then. My chest tightened. Traveling? Did she say where? He shook his head. Nope. I didn't matter. I already had an inkling. I'll call her, I said after a moment. Daniel smiled, satisfied. Okay, don't forget. I won't, I promised. We talked for a bit longer, and Daniel showed me the bespoke suit my mother had given him. After the call ended, the room seemed to thicken with silence, weighted and still. I stared at the screen for several seconds before pulling up my contacts and hovering over my mother's. I hadn't spoken to her properly since the Frostbane Library. Looking back, her words hadn't just wounded me. They'd rooted themselves deep, becoming the spark that ignited everything, the vision of the moon goddess and Alina, and this journey I might never have taken otherwise. I exhaled and pressed call. She answered on the third ring. Sarah? Surprise flickered across her face, quickly masked by composure. I was just thinking about you. I held back a disbelieving snort. I heard you sent Daniel his gift early, I said. Yes, she replied. I wasn't sure I'd see him before the holidays. Something in her tone shifted, calculating, hesitating. And you? She asked. Are you well? I studied her face, the familiar elegance, the careful distance, and realized she already knew something was different. I am, I said. Better than I've ever been. Her eyes sharpened. I can hear it in your voice, see it in your face. I didn't bother easing into it. Yes, I've heard the glow is a byproduct of the Origin Archives room. My mother's expression froze, not blank, but startled, as if I'd spoken a password she hadn't expected anyone else to know. You've been there, she said slowly. I don't know why you sound surprised, I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could. After all, Father went there too. Her breath caught. That shouldn't have been possible. And yet, I said evenly, it was. She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, something guarded had slid into place. Sarah, she said carefully, there are things that cannot be explained over a call. I gave you the chance to explain face to face, I bit out. Remember? Her pause was answer enough. I'll ask this new question, Mother. I expect a lie, but I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. My mother's gulp was audible down the line. What did you and Father discover about me, and then hide? Her eyes widened. Sarah, why, I demanded, did my powers require suppression? She inhaled sharply. You must not tell anyone what you can do. No one can find out, Sarah, especially not rogues. This time I did snort. It was a little too late for that. Why? I pressed. Because it makes you a target. I already am, I shot back. Her face faltered just a fraction before she composed again. We did what we thought was best. For who? She started to speak, then stopped. When I return, she said instead, I will explain everything. When you return, I echoed, from visiting Celeste. Her lips thinned. I nodded. Of course, that's where you're going. Every year like clockwork. Sarah, I have to go, I said, ending the call before my voice could betray me. In the grand scheme of things, envy over my mother's relationship with Celeste was laughably mediocre. The laptop screen had faded to black, and I lingered, gazing at my own reflection in the darkness. I shouldn't have been surprised. After all, for the last 10 years, my mother had gone to spend Christmas wherever Celeste was, and she'd told me she would leave after Daniel's heir ceremony anyway. I myself had encouraged her to travel to Celeste if she missed her so much. Still, I stood and drifted back to the window. The sea stretched endlessly before me, vast and unknowable. Was I now supposed to wait for my mother to finish catering to my sister before I got my answers? Waiting, Alina said softly, has never protected you. No, I agreed. It hasn't. I straightened, a new resolve crystallizing within me. If my mother wouldn't give me answers, I would take them myself. Every secret, every suppression, every truth buried in archives and lies. I wasn't done waking up. Margaret's Pove. The dial tone droned on, steady, impersonal, unforgiving. I stared at the dark screen of my phone, my fingers still curled around it as though if I held on long enough, the call might resume on its own. As though Serafina might sigh, call my name the way she used to when she was small, and give me one more chance to find the right words. The sound finally cut off. The silence that followed was heavier, more suffocating than the dial tone itself. I lowered the phone slowly, my hand trembling despite years of discipline and posturing that should have taught my body better. For a long moment, I simply stood there in my room, staring at nothing, my reflection faintly visible in the glass wall overlooking the moonlit garden. I had done it again, pushed Sarah away. The realization struck with dull, familiar pain, like pressing on a bruise you believed no longer existed, only to find it still tender beneath the surface. I closed my eyes. The sealing had been necessary. That truth anchored me, as it always had. No matter how often guilt gnawed at the edges of my resolve, no matter how vividly Serafina's young face haunted my dreams, that single fact had never wavered. Necessary. And yet, memory surged without invitation, dragging me backward more than 2 decades to a time when necessity had not yet entered my vocabulary. Sarah had been 6, too young to understand why her mother hovered, why her father's gaze tracked her every movement with quiet vigilance. I knew, now, as an adult, she believed her father and I had always harbored contempt for her. But that was never true. Even the difficulty of her birth, the agony, the blood, the terror, my own brush with death, could not diminish the joy that flooded us when we first held her. She had been worth every moment of it. She had been everything. My firstborn. My daughter. In my bloodline, daughters carried weight, meaning, power. We traced ourselves through the women, through their resilience and quiet dominion, through the way they shaped the world without ever needing to announce it. And Sarah had fit so perfectly into that expectation. She was healthy, bright-eyed, curious in a way that delighted rather than exhausted. She laughed easily, loved deeply, and had a way of drawing people toward her without trying. Servants adored her. Elders smiled indulgently at her questions. Even Edward, stern, austere Edward, always melted when she slipped her tiny hand into his. She was perfect. Until she wasn't. The first incident had been easy to dismiss, a tantrum, we told ourselves. We were overreacting, a bad dream spilling into daylight. The second was harder. The third sent a cold thread of fear curling down my spine. Things broke around her. Not always visibly, not always dramatically. Sometimes it was a headache so sudden and severe that she collapsed, screaming. Sometimes it was a servant fainting when Sarah cried too hard. Sometimes it was pressure, an unseen force that thickened the air, made my skin crawl, and set every instinct on edge. At first, we tried to help. We chased every remedy, ancient tomes, modern experts, called in owed favors, relentlessly, desperate for hope. We framed her peculiarity as delayed wolf emergence, as an anomaly that would correct itself with time. It didn't. It escalated. The power, whatever it was, manifested in bursts that left Sarah pale and trembling, her small frame buckling under the force of what surged through her. Each episode arrived sooner, struck harder. Once she stopped breathing. I still remembered collapsing to the floor, cradling her limp body, screaming for healers, for anyone, for something to fix what was so terribly wrong with my baby girl. Edward's face haunted me, ashen, stricken with a terror I had never seen in him. The realization came slowly, and after we almost lost her more than once, we could no longer deny it. This wasn't a gift that could be trained. It wasn't something that could be guided gently into control. It was too much, too dangerous, too hungry. Fate had not blessed us with a powerful daughter. It had marked us with a curse. We resisted that conclusion with everything we had because accepting it meant acknowledging the next step, and that step was unthinkable. If the girl walks the path she was born for, she will be hunted. Danger will greet her at every curve of the road. If she remains ordinary, she will live. She had to live. She had to. So we did it, the sealing. Even now, the mere thought of the word churned my stomach. But when Catherine arrived, grave, composed, eyes sharp with an understanding that went far deeper than ours, she confirmed what we had been desperately avoiding. If we did nothing, Sarah would die. Not immediately, not cleanly, but eventually. Her body would fail under the strain, or she would draw attention she could not survive, or the power itself would consume her. The ceiling was the only path that led to a future where she lived, even if that future was smaller, ordinary. I moved towards the drawer beneath my desk and unlocked it, retrieving the old frame I never let myself look at for too long. The day before the ritual, we gave Sarah everything. Edward and I planned it carefully, a perfect day, crafted down to the smallest detail. No lessons, no expectations, just laughter and sunlight and the illusion of normalcy. We rented out an amusement park, let her run wild until her cheeks glowed and her hair whipped into knots. We gorged on sweets and took silly photos. One of them sat now in my hands. I stroked a trembling finger along the edges of the frame, worn smooth with time. In the photo, we stood entwined, Sarah perched in Edward's arms, my own wrapped around them, all of us beaming at the lens. It was the happiest day of our lives, and the last before everything changed. The ritual itself was mercifully hazy in my memory. Some wounds the mind refuses to reopen fully, but I remembered the aftermath. Sarah woke confused, quieter, diminished, and to protect the secret, to ensure nothing stirred the sealed power, we had done something else, a choice I still struggled to justify even now. We put Ethan and Celeste's memories to sleep, not erased, just tucked away. Their memories of Sarah's episodes softened, blurred into hazy recollections of sickness and frailty, enough to keep them from asking the wrong questions, enough to keep Sarah safe. From that day on, she was unremarkable, ordinary. We kept her close, sheltered, watched, and she lived. She struggled, yes. There were moments of friction, of resentment, of pain, and I told myself they were preferable to a grave. At least she was alive. That conviction had carried me for more than 20 years. But since that day in the library, doubt had begun to seep in. And now, tonight, she'd found the Origins Archives room. She had broken the seal. The force we'd worked so hard to bury was no longer slumbering. Worse still, she sounded well, stronger, brighter, more herself than she had ever been. The plan had veered off course, dangerously. And Edward, I pressed my fingers to my lips, stifling a sob as his face surfaced in my mind. Months before his passing, he had broached the subject so carefully I'd pretended not to understand. Suggested, obliquely, that perhaps the time had come to reconsider old decisions. I had shut him down, told him it was too late, too dangerous, that reopening those wounds would only bring pain. Now I wondered if he had sensed what I could not, if he had felt the world shifting beneath the safety net we had so carefully woven. I set the photo aside and began to pace, my steps restless and uneven. I had promised Serafina the truth. I would not fail her again. If answers existed, they lay with Catherine. She had performed the sealing. She had understood its cost and risks. She knew exactly what had been taken. Luckily, she was in the Maldives with Celeste. Perfect coincidence. I would go ahead of schedule, not just as a mother visiting her daughter, but as a woman ready at last to face the consequences of her own choices. The past had been buried for decades, but now it was stirring, and I would meet it head-on. Serafina's Pove. I woke to the sound of the sea, not the violent crash or sharp slap of water, but the slow, breathing rhythm of waves folding into themselves, over and over again. The room was washed in pale morning light, the curtains stirring softly as if nudged awake alongside me. For a moment, I lay still, suspended between sleep and memory. Then the memory of my mother's call surfaced, unbidden. The clipped pauses, the careful half-answers, the way she'd evaded again, as she always did. A small knot formed beneath my ribs, not sharp enough to hurt, not heavy enough to crush. Just there. "You're allowed to feel it," Alina said gently. I exhaled into the pillow. "I know, but you're not allowed to let it slow you." That drew a faint smile. I rolled onto my back, eyes tracing the ceiling beams. The disappointment lingered, thin and translucent, like morning mist, present, but already dissolving in the light. "She doesn't get to decide how far I go anymore," I murmured aloud. Alina's presence warmed in quiet agreement. "You came this far on your own strength. You'll reach the end the same way." That settled something inside me. I dressed quickly and made my way downstairs, following the sound of voices and light footsteps echoing through the open hall. "Good morning." Dora barreled into me at full speed before I even reached the last step, tiny arms wrapping around my legs with familiar certainty. Half her curls were sleep-tangled, the rest woven into little braids. Her blue and gold eyes sparkled like sunrise. "You didn't disappear," she announced, clearly relieved. I laughed, crouching automatically. "Was that a concern?" She nodded solemnly. "Sometimes I have really strong dreams, and then I wake up, and there isn't a mermaid hugging me. I thought you were a dream, too." I giggled, smoothing her hair back gently. "Not today." Her grin returned instantly, contagious and unguarded. No adults were in sight, but breakfast was already in full swing. Kai sat at the head of the table, methodically buttering toast while keeping half an eye on his siblings. Dora darted out of my arms and plopped herself in front of Neri, who rolled her eyes fondly before she continued braiding her little sister's hair with practiced fingers. Reef crouched by the open doors, utterly absorbed in something small and wriggling, cradled carefully in his hands. "Morning," I greeted. Kai looked up first, offering a polite nod and smile. "Good morning, Sarah. Did you sleep well?" I was a little taken aback by his grown-up tone. "I did, thank you." Neri beamed at me from behind Dora. "You should let me braid your hair later." Reef popped up beside me. "Do you want to see a sand dragon?" I blinked. "Oh, what?" He thrust his hands forward. Inside was a twisted knot of driftwood, damp and crooked, unmistakably wood, and yet somehow also unmistakably a dragon. "It guards the tide pools," he explained earnestly. "This one's old, probably older than the pack." "That's fascinating." "Our parents have a meeting this morning," Kai informed me, and Dora cut her brother off, tugging my sleeve impatiently, having once again slipped out of Neri's hold. "We're going to the beach. You're coming." I glanced down the corridor leading deeper into the estate, toward Corin's likely whereabouts, toward 1,000 unanswered questions queued up in my mind. Then I looked down at Dora's expectant face. "Okay," I sighed. "Just for a little while." Her cheer was immediate and explosive. In a blur of buttered toast and coffee, I found myself heading to the beach with Celine's children. The beach was beautiful in broad daylight. The tide was low, exposing broad stretches of wet sand that gleamed like polished glass. Seagulls wheeled overhead, calling to each other as the children raced ahead, flinging off shoes and jackets with wild abandon. With Kai around, I quickly understood why there wasn't an adult watching the kids. He stationed himself instinctively, close enough to step in, far enough to let them roam free. Now and then, his gaze flicked to Dora, tracking her movements with quiet vigilance that reminded me painfully of someone else. Neri gathered shells with delicate focus, arranging them into small patterns while humming. Her voice, light and melodic, drifted across the shore. To my astonishment, a cluster of seabirds gathered nearby, hopping and swaying as if enchanted by her song. "Dora calls her a werewolf Snow White," Kai said quietly when he noticed me watching. "The birds like her singing." Neri flushed at his words but didn't stop singing. Reef dragged me from discovery to discovery, holes that were definitely homes to ancient sea spirits, smooth stones that could absolutely grant wishes if thrown correctly, and a piece of seaweed he insisted was proof of a legendary Leviathan sighting. I listened, I laughed, I crouched and peered and pretended with a carelessness I'd forgotten I possessed. Celine's children were wonderful, each one unique and special in their own way. And yet, every time Dora squealed with delight, every time Kai patiently reined in Reef's wilder impulses, every time Reef's wilder impulses broke free, something tugged at my chest. Daniel would love this. The thought arrived uninvited, warm and aching all at once. I pictured him running wild with the kids on the sand, as free and happy as he'd been on Kieran's island, and my heart clenched. When the kids decided that beach volleyball played just at the edge of the shore was the next great adventure, I hesitated. "I think I'll watch," I said lightly. "From over there." Kai studied me for a moment, perceptive beyond his years, like Daniel. "You don't like the water much, do you?" I met his gaze and smiled. An image of another beach, of a high wave consuming me, flashed in my mind. "I'm working on it." He nodded, accepting that answer without pressing. I perched on a cluster of sun-warmed rocks just out of reach of the tide and pulled out my phone. Daniel picked up on the second ring, except it wasn't Daniel. "Sarah?" Kieran's face filled the screen. "Oh," I said, startled. "Hi, sorry, I was calling Daniel." "He's still training," Kieran replied. "I can get him if you want." "No, it's fine," I said quickly. "I can call back later." I moved to end the call. Wait, something in his tone stopped me. He smiled then, not sharp or guarded, just soft. You look different, he said. Let me guess, I'm glowing? His own laugh seemed to surprise him, and the sound sent a flutter through my chest. That's the word, he said. The sea suits you. Heat crept into my cheeks. Thank you, it's nice here. And because I was polite, not because I'd wondered about him after hearing he'd come after me, I asked, how are things? Then Kieran and I did something as absurd as skydiving without a parachute. We made small talk. At first it was awkward, weather, schedules, the kind of careful conversation built to tiptoe around landmines. But slowly, almost without noticing, the stiffness faded. I found myself describing Celine's family, Dora's insistence on adopting me, Reef's dragons, and Neri's singing. Kieran listened, amused and thoughtful. Daniel would love it there, he said. I was just thinking that, I admitted softly. Silence settled between us then, surprisingly not uncomfortable. Kieran seemed different. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the angsty, broody alpha I knew who'd let me go by the skin of his teeth had been replaced by this carefree man with an easy smile who'd asked what my freaking room smelt like. Okay, one last round, Kai called out, and then we have to go in for dinner. Dinner? That was when I realized how long we'd been talking. It was the longest conversation I'd ever had with Kieran that didn't end in an argument or leave my chest tight with tension. I cleared my throat. I should check on the kids. Right, he said, then hesitated before continuing. Sarah, I've been working on something, a Christmas gift. My heart skipped. I was hoping, he added carefully, that you might be willing to see it when you get back. My cheeks burned. I must have been out in the sun too long. I'll think about it, he smiled. That's all I ask. After the call ended, I sat for a moment longer, staring at the darkened screen. That was nice. An incredulous sound slipped past my lips. Had I accidentally called into an opposite dimension? Still distracted by the unexpected warmth of my call with Kieran, I stood. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the sand as I stepped toward the children. Then the world shifted. The wave came without warning, not a gradual surge, not a teasing pull. It rose, massive, sudden, wrong, and slammed into the shore with violent force. Water hit my legs, my waist, my chest. Then it lifted me clean off my feet. I gasped, breath tearing from my lungs as cold engulfed me, spinning me sideways, backward, under. The roar of the sea swallowed everything else. Serafina's Pove. Cold engulfed me. The suffocating weight pressed in from every direction, thick and relentless, as the sea swallowed me whole. My body reacted before my mind could catch up. Lungs spasmed, limbs thrashed as the undertow snatched me, dragging me sideways and down. Sand scoured my skin. Water forced its way into my mouth, my nose, my throat. Dread crashed over me. Not new. Never new. Old. Visceral. Familiar as my own heartbeat. I was a child again. The world shifted, warped by panic and memory, and suddenly the sea was gone, replaced by murky green water and the sharp shock of cold stone beneath my palms. I was small, far too small. My limbs felt alien, weighed down by drenched fabric that clung like grasping hands. I remembered the shove, cruel hands at my back, sudden and vicious, laughter echoing as I stumbled, and the lake behind the Lockwood estate surged up to meet me. Water closed over my head. I kicked and flailed, shoes weighing me down, skirts tangling around my legs. The surface shimmered just beyond reach, light rippling above in cruel mockery. My chest burned for air, panic sharpened into something terrible and lucid. I'm going to die. The thought had come with frightening clarity, stripped of drama or fear. That awful certainty that I would disappear before I'd ever mattered. Back then, my father had dragged me out, coughing and sobbing, crushing me to his chest as if sheer will could anchor me to the world again. Back at the koi pond, Kieran had pulled me out. This time, water flooded my lungs. The world smeared and blurred, something flickered at the ragged edge of my awareness. A woman stood on the shore. Her face was lost to shadow. Only her silhouette remained, the shape of her clothes oddly out of place in the memory. She stood unmoving, her presence remote yet inescapable. Then the world jolted. Strong, unyielding arms wrapped around me, slicing through the water with ruthless efficiency. My body was yanked upward, the surface exploding as we broke through. I gasped, choking as air crashed into my lungs, burning, painful, glorious. I barely registered the face above me. Brown hair slicked dark to his head, blue and green eyes blazing with determination and fear. Kieran. He dragged me through the water, one arm locked around my torso as he pulled us both toward shore. As my vision dimmed, something strange flickered at the edge of sight. Behind him, a flash of silver blue, a powerful, sleek curve, unmistakable yet utterly impossible, a fishtail. Then everything went black. When awareness returned, it did so gently. Soft sheets cocooned me, the muted hush of a familiar room, the scent of citrus, salt, and something warm, perhaps tea, filled the air. My chest ached with every breath, but the pain was distant, manageable. Sarah? The voice was small and trembling. I opened my eyes. Dora stood at my bedside, eyes shining with tears too large for her small face. Her hands clutched the blanket like it was the only thing holding her together. Relief flooded her expression the moment she saw me stir. "She's awake," she whispered urgently, glancing over her shoulder. Kai and Neri hovered in the doorway, guilt carved deep into their young faces. Reef lingered behind them, unusually still, hands knotted at his chest. Dora climbed onto the bed, curling into my side and burying her face in my shoulder with a muffled sob. I wrapped an arm around her instinctively, my own chest tightening. "I'm okay," I rasped, my throat raw. Hey, I'm okay." Celine rushed in moments later, Adrian close behind her. "Oh, Sarah," she breathed, crossing the room in 3 quick strides. "I'm so sorry. We had an impromptu meeting to attend, but we shouldn't have left you on your own as our guest. We should never have gone that far. Her voice broke. Adrian's jaw was clenched tight, his hand resting heavily on her back. "We can't imagine what would have happened," Celine continued, eyes shining. "If Kieran hadn't been there." "I'm all right," I said again, more firmly this time. Really. It mattered that they believed me. I was weary of being a burden everywhere I went, and I didn't want any tainted memories of Seabbze. Kai swallowed hard and stepped forward, his head bowed. "It was our idea," he said quietly. "To play near the shore." "You didn't do anything wrong," I told him. "None of you did." Reef sniffed. "The wave came out of nowhere," he grumbled. "That's not fair." That drew a weak laugh from me. Somewhere in the corner of the room, I heard a sharp intake of breath. My gaze slid past them to Kieran, standing with arms folded, his expression carefully neutral. He stiffened when our eyes met, as if surprised to be noticed. "You saved me," I whispered. He gave a short nod and immediately looked away, as if embarrassed by the attention. "Thank you," I said softly. He shrugged. "You're welcome." Something tugged at my thoughts, an echo of that last impossible image, but before I could grasp it, Celine sighed. "We should leave you to rest and recuperate." Dora tightened her grip around me. "I'm staying," she declared. "I have to make sure Auntie Sarah doesn't disappear." Celine sighed. "Dora, no," I said quickly, managing a smile despite the lingering ache in my chest. "I'd like that." I ruffled Dora's curls. "Her company is delightful." Dora grinned, pressing her head into the crook of my neck. "See, Mommy, I'm delightful." Laughter rippled through the room, gentle and relieved, and Celine finally exhaled. She brushed a hand over Dora's back, her expression softening with resignation. "Very well," she said quietly. "But no antics, okay? Sarah doesn't need any more stress." Dora nodded solemnly, as if accepting a sacred duty. Celine turned back to me. "We'll have a healer check on you again shortly," she said. "Just to be safe." "I really am fine," I repeated, though my voice sounded thinner than I intended. Adrian inclined his head. "Even so," he said gently, "humor us." Kai straightened. "Can we stay too? We can help," he offered quickly. "Neri can get fresh water, and I can." "You can sit and be quiet," Celine interrupted, though there was no reprimand in her tone. "All of you." The children obeyed at once, clustering near the foot of the bed. Reef scrambled onto a low chair, legs swinging restlessly until Neri reached out and stilled him with a gentle touch. A healer arrived soon after, a calm, middle-aged woman who smelled faintly of herbs and the sea. She checked my pulse, listened to my breathing, murmured reassurances while pressing warm fingers to my wrists and collarbone. Each test ended the same, a small nod, a thoughtful hum. "She swallowed some water," the healer said at last. "But there's no lasting damage. Strong lungs, strong heart." Relief swept through the room like a long-held breath finally released. After she left, Celine brought me a cup of warm tea, coaxing me to sip slowly while Dora supervised with fierce protective intensity. Too fast, Dora warned. You have to do it like this. She demonstrated with an exaggerated, delicate sip of her own imaginary cup. I smiled and obeyed. As time slipped by, the adrenaline faded, replaced by a bone-deep wariness that seeped into my limbs. Someone tucked the blanket higher around me. Someone else cracked the curtains, letting the last amber light of dusk spill across the room. Eventually, Celine stood. "All right," she said softly. "Let's give Sarah some quiet." Kai rose first and lifted his little sister out of my bed. "I'll make sure Dora doesn't try to sneak back," he promised. "I wasn't going to," Dora protested, lightly hitting his chest with a small fist. "Yes, you were," Neri said flatly, looping her arm through Reef's and steering him toward the door. Celine lingered last. She squeezed my hand softly. "You're safe here," she said, voice low. "Please remember that." "I do," I replied and meant it. She hesitated, offering me one last, guilt-tinged smile before closing the door softly behind her. The room dimmed. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant hush of the sea beyond the windows. My body ached with the dull heaviness that followed shock, but it was an ache I could bear, proof that I was still here, still breathing. When sleep finally dragged me under, it offered no rest. Water, darkness, struggle. I kicked and thrashed, lungs screaming as that same terrible certainty closed in around me. Then a sound sliced through the panic, a song, low, gentle. The melody wrapped around me like warm arms, soothing terror, slowing my heartbeat, guiding me upward instead of sinking down. I woke with a gasp, sheets clammy beneath me, heart pounding. The song, however, followed me into the waking world. It drifted through the open balcony doors. I pushed myself up and followed it outside. Moonlight spilled across the stone, silver and soft. Kieran stood at the railing, his back to me, the sea stretching endless and dark beyond him. He stopped singing the instant he sensed me. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, not turning. "Did I wake you?" "No," I said, my voice hoarse. "You helped." He nodded once, a muscle jumping in his jaw. "Good." I stepped closer. "Kieran, back there earlier," he sighed. "I'm sorry, Sarah." I frowned. "You saved my life. Why would you apologize?" "Because it was my fault."